5 was, as we know, basically the Aristeia of Diomedes, the dude who we love to pieces. We love him. Everybody wants a Diomedes on their team. Absolute badass, and listened to Athena, who said, don't fight the gods unless you find that hoe Aphrodite, in which case, cut a bitch. And he was like, done. So book 6, we're going to get the last little trickling, we're winding down the Aristeia, and we're going to come back to Hector. Helen will reappear. So unfortunately will Paris. Xenia is going to rear its ugly head. It's going to be a good time. By good time, I mean there might be some crying from some people, but that's fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, good girl. All right. Book 6. Hector returns to Troy. So the clash of Achaean and Trojan troops was on its own. The battle in all its fury, veering back and forth, careening down the plain as they sent their bronze lances hurtling side to side between the Simois' banks and Xanthus' swirling rapids. That Achaean bulwark giant Ajax came up first. Telamonian Ajax, my boy, broke the Trojan line and brought his men some hope, spearing the bravest man the Thracians fielded. Acamas, tall and staunch, Eusorus' son, the first to hurl. Great Ajax hit the ridge of the helmet's horsehair crest, the bronze point stuck in Acamas' forehead, pounding through the skull, and the dart came swirling down to shroud his eyes. Essentially, headshot. He just headshotted this guy. It's my man. A shattering war cry. Diomedes killed off Axilus, Teuthras' son, who had lived in rock-built Arispe, a man of means and a friend to all mankind. At his roadside house, he'd warm all corners in. But who of his guests would greet his enemy now, meet him face to face, and ward off grisly death? Diomedes killed the man and his aide in arms at once. Axilus and Calesius, who always bore his team, both at a stroke he drove beneath the earth. Euryalus killed Rhesus, killed Opheltius, turned and went for Pedasus and Aeseppus, twins, the nymph of the spring. Abarbarea bore Bucolion. Bucolion, son himself to the lofty king Laomedon, first of the line, though his mother bore the prince in secrecy and shadow. Tending his flocks one day, Bucolion took the nymph in a strong surge of love, and beneath his force she bore him twin sons. But now the son of Megistius hacked the force from beneath them both, and loosed their gleaming limbs, and tore the armor off the dead men's shoulders. Polypoetes braced for battle, killed Astyalus. Winging his bronze spear, Odysseus slew Paidetes, bred in Percotti, and Teucer did the same for the royal Aretaon. Ableros went down too, under the flashing lance of Nestor's son, Antilochus, and Elatus under the lord of men Agamemnon's strength. Elatus lived by the banks of rippling Satnioius, in Pedasus perched in cliffs. The hero, Laetus, ran Phylacus down to the ground at a dead run, and Eurypylus killed Melanthius outright. So not Melanthius, who we infamously know from the Odyssey, just a different guy with the same name. But Menelaus, lord of the war cry, had caught Adrestus alive. Rearing, bolting in terror down the plain, his horses snared themselves in tamarisk branches, splintered his curved chariot just at the pole's tip, and breaking free they made a dash for the city walls, where battle teams by the drove stampeded back in panic. So, I want to talk a bit about this where it says the horses snared themselves in tamarisk branches. The tamarisk, which is genus Tamarix, it's also known as salt cedar and taray, T-A-R-A-Y. Taray, IDK, mate. They are evergreen deciduous trees or shrubs. It sounds like these would have been the shrub version if the chariot's getting and the horses are getting tangled in it. They tend to grow in very saline-rich soils, and they form these really dense thickets. So you can imagine, like, since they're all over the plain, there is elements of, like, shrubbery and other things around. And so these horses, they're kind of careening through, and they get caught in these, like, thicket-like kind of shrubs, which I'm like, ooh, that sucks. Just trying to give an understanding of what that is. I mean, I was sort of just surprised to know that it could be either a tree or a shrub. And I was like, well, obviously I'm assuming we're talking about a shrubbery. And a heading, yes. A shrubbery. That's what we want. They have these really nice pink tips. Oh, that's good to know. Are struggling through the thicket. Ouch. Yeah. So, yeah, the horses aren't having a great time either. So, yeah. And apparently they do look nice, so you can look them up if you wish. But their master, I swear by Zeus, he is broken in half. But their master hurled from the chariot, tumbling over the wheel and pitching face down in the dust. Amazed he lived through that. That had to hurt. And above him now rose Menelaus, his spear's long shadow looming. Adrestus hugged his knees and begged him, pleading, "Take me alive, Atrides. Take a ransom worth my life. Treasures are piled up in my rich father's house, bronze and gold and a plenty of well-wrought iron. Father would give you anything, gladly, priceless ransom if only he learns I'm still alive in Argive ships." So, yeah, we talked about this in the introductory section that we did, which was this idea of ransoming prisoners. I mean, this is something you can trace historically all the way up through even like medieval times, where it was better to take a high-value prisoner captive and ransom them back because you make money. It's kind of been established that the Greeks have sort of been doing this. It's how they've gotten a lot wealthier over 9 years as they've been making money doing this. But again, what we're going to see here in the Iliad and what we're about to see is that this practice of keeping people, high-value targets, kind of alive and ransoming them back. Hello. Oh, hello from Germany. Guten Tag. Guten Tag. Yes, that's hello. That's what little German I know. We know that in the Iliad, we are not going to have this happen. There's going to be a couple moments like this where people are going to beg for their lives and say, ransom me. You'll get wealthy. My father will absolutely pay a price for me. But the Greeks aren't going to take it because this is year 9. Everybody's really tired. We've seen the Greeks are kind of at the end of their tether. And even the fighting here, I mean, I just read all of these moments where tons of people have killed each other, right? Like, there's a kind of frenzied nature that's happening here. There's an urgency to what's happening. Now, we know Agamemnon thinks, I'm taking Troy today, which we know ain't true, but he had his deceptive dream, and that's what he thinks is happening. And everybody else is just sort of on edge and a little jumpier than they usually are. So it's, Richard the Lionheart, yeah, that was notorious. I mean, it is about glory and it is about riches, but right now on the field, they would rather just kill you and move on. They do care about glory and riches, but in this case, it's sort of just like, not right now. At this point, no. The Greeks are reaching a kind of savagery, we'll say, air quotes here, that maybe had not been present in the previous 9 years because of the fact it's been 9 years. They are in an attritional war and they're not at home. They're not defending, they're attacking. So they're having a harder time because they're away from their families. And I would say that, what we're going to see again is Menelaus is going to consider this, and then he's going to immediately he's going to be convinced not to do it. And I would say that arguably the kind of menace, that wrath of Achilles, which was that sort of insane wrath, it's almost, and the kind of madness it induces, I would say it's almost virulent, it's almost contagious. So you have, again, this kind of nervous, unsettled energy with the Greeks, which is making them just be a little wilder, a little faster, a little less organized. And I mean, it's gonna bite them in the ass a little bit later, but this is where you're seeing it in these kind of war scenes. Okay. His pleas were moving the heart in Menelaus just at the point of handing him to an aide to take him back to the fast Achaean ships, when up rushed Agamemnon, blocking his way and shouting out, "So soft, dear brother, why? Why such concern for enemies? I suppose you got such tender, loving care at home from the Trojans. Would to God not one of them could escape his sudden plunging death beneath our hands. No, baby boy still in his mother's belly, not even he escape. All Ilium blotted out, no tears for their lives, no markers for their graves." And the iron warrior brought his brother round, rough justice, fitting too. Menelaus shoved Adrestus back with a fist. Powerful Agamemnon stabbed him in the flank, and back on his side the fighter went, face up. The son of Atreus dug a heel in his heaving chest and wrenched the ash spear out. So again, we see Menelaus almost continued in this, and Agamemnon was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And there is, again, an almost manic urgency to Agamemnon. I didn't talk about it too much in the previous, I might have mentioned it last book or even before. I'm convinced, and this is part of me, I read a paper on this. Give the kill to Agamemnon. Agamemnon's the one who kills him. A little Aggie, which for those who have been in the Discord, my friend used that said little Aggie to refer to Agamemnon, and it sort of stuck. Little Aggie here, he's going through a mental health crisis. I'm convinced throughout most of the Iliad, but especially the first 4 books you can look at, Agamemnon is having a neurotic break with reality. His behavior is so erratic. And even to his fellow warriors, it seems kind of erratic a lot of the times. And it's sort of inexplicable because you can't imagine that somebody this erratic, this almost manic and then depressive and everything else. And I'm not saying he's bipolar. I'm just saying he swings from high to low rapidly. And in such a way where I'm like, there is no way he has done this consistently for 9 years. There's no way anybody would follow this guy. And it's not even euphoric. Like his highs are almost like, again, I'll probably, the article I read is a little dated in some of its language. But it was a fascinating article looking at the first 4 books of the Iliad and talking about how it does seem Agamemnon is in a mental health crisis. I actually think it makes sense because this just doesn't seem like behavior that anybody would follow. And they've been following this guy with no issue for like 9 years. He seems to have been perfectly fine at keeping people under his command. And we have a moment in book 4 where Sthenelus, who's a buddy of Diomedes, is like, why are you saying the wrong thing when we know you know how to say the right thing? Like, what are you doing? What's going on? And it was a fascinating thing. So I'm like, you know what? Actually, this clocks. I think he's just having a breakdown. I think 9 years of war have finally kind of cracked him a little bit. And everything that going all the way back to book 1, I think he's already in the midst of a slight mental health crisis. I think it spirals out of control and he's kind of cracking. And I'm like, dude, it took you 9 years of an attritional war to crack. You're stronger than I am. But we also then have to say, we've now added the effect of this deceptive dream he got by Zeus, where he thinks, I'm taking Troy today, which has to make this sort of anxiety that's in there even worse and make him even more almost manic in a way. And when I say manic here, I'm not trying to say clinically, but like just the sort of jumpy, on edge, like almost high kind of behavior he sometimes exhibits. And I'm like, I think he's already got a bit of that. And then that deceptive dream kicks it up. In the words of Emerald, we're going to kick it up a notch. Like, it just kicks it up even a higher notch. Because what Zeus did in giving him that dream, it tapped into this sort of pre-existing anxiety over, like, ending the war soon and really wanting to end it. Which, again, I'm like, 9 years of an attritional war is going to do damage to everyone's psyche. I think Agamemnon, who's the guy who, he's the Anax, he's the guy in charge of everybody. He's the one that they ultimately are all going to look to and all going to come to. And he's the one who, if they were to leave in disgrace, almost all the shit is mostly going to pile back on him. I think he's the one who's going to have the most anxiety, right? He's the one who's, the tantrum of Achilles, I know. Like, he's the one who's going to, he feels the most pressure. Yeah, it's called a mental breakdown. I'm going to have bodies hit the floor. Divine blessing. Bam, bam. Yeah. Game Wizard, I'm so glad you got my Emerald Lagasse reference. This gives me joy. No, and they are all desperate to go home. I mean, they all almost booked it in book 2. So there is obviously an element where Agamemnon, I think he feels very out of control. Everything feels very out of control for him. And he's desperately trying to gather control. He also obviously has a very low ego, a low, and by low I mean like a fragile ego. He's ultimately very insecure. Again, I'll have to link the article that I found on JSTOR. Again, some of the language it revolving around the psychology and psychiatry stuff is probably a little dated, but it was super fascinating. And I went, this actually makes a lot of sense in my we get our first moment of, hey, just ransom me, you'll get rich. And at this point, the Greeks are like, we've been getting rich. We want this done. And I will say, Agamemnon goes, I suppose you got such tender loving care at home from the Trojans. Ooh, that's saying the tender loving care he got from the Trojans when Menelaus was at home was Paris stealing his wife. Hey, this is why we're fighting them. Remember? Your private grievance got blown to astronomical proportions because it became a massive international diplomatic issue. Aggie. Little Aggie. I love we have our kill counter going. So yeah, that was, but it definitely says we're reaching a point. May not like Agamemnon. Exactly, no. You can absolutely still dislike Agamemnon as a character. I will never say you have to like him. But looking at him that way, I think for me, the kind of erratic nature of his behavior that you guys have seen thus far, and which will kind of continue through the Iliad, to me makes more sense if I go, I think he's kind of cracked. I think he's having a neurotic break and has cracked for most of this epic. And as much as it's aggravating and inflaming issues he's already got, and it's coming from a sense of, I think he really wants the war to be over. And then I think he also feels guilty about wanting it to be over, because what does that say about him in this society if he just wants to pack it up and leave, and he can't do that, and then everything, I'm like, I get it. Again, he does some horrific shit, but I get it. As I say, at the end of the day, but hear me out. As I have to do with all the Greek heroes, but yes, they're terrible, they do all this and this, but hear me out. Woo! And here came Nestor, with orders ringing down the field. My comrades, fighting Danaans, aids of Ares, no plunder now. Don't lag behind. Don't fling yourself at spoils just to haul the biggest portion back to your ship. Now's the time for killing. Later, at leisure, strip the corpses up and down the plain. Which, yeah, stripping the corpses, we know, they loot the booty. It happens all the time. And Nestor's right, hold off, fight now. Because if you start trying to loot in the middle of the battle, you'll probably get killed. A lot of people get killed while they're fighting over the bodies of, dead comrades or enemies because somebody wants to do some looting or protect a body. It happens all the time. All the time. So he ordered, spurring each man's nerve. And the next moment, crowds of Trojans once again would have clambered back inside their city walls, terror-struck by the Argives primed for battle. But Helenus, son of Priam, best of the seers who scan the flights of birds, came striding up to Aeneas and Hector, calling out, My captains, you bear the brunt of Troy's and Lycia's fighting. You are our bravest of men. Whatever the enterprise, pitched battle itself or planning our campaigns, so stand your ground right here. Go through the ranks and rally all the troops. Hold back our retreating mobs outside the gates before they throw themselves into their women's arms in fear. A great joy to our enemies closing for the kill. And once you've roused our lines to the last man, we'll hold out here and fight the Argives down. Hard hit as we are, necessity drives us on. But you, Hector, you must go back to the city. Tell our mother to gather all the older noble women together in grey-eyed Athena's shrine on the city crest, unlock the doors of the goddess's sacred chamber, and take a robe, the largest, loveliest robe that she can find throughout the royal halls, a gift that far and away she prizes most herself, and spread it out across the sleek-haired goddess's knees. Then promise to sacrifice 12 heifers in her shrine. Yearlings never broken, if only she'll pity Troy, and the Trojan wives, and all our helpless children. If only she'll hold Diomedes back from the holy city. That wild spearman, that invincible, headlong terror. He is the strongest Argive now, I tell you. Never once did we fear Achilles so, captain of armies, born of a goddess too, or so they say. But here's a maniac run amok. No one can match his fury man to man. Okay, a couple things to talk in this paragraph. First, in the grey-eyed Athena's shrine on the city crest. This shrine is where, on the city's crest, is probably up on a hill. It's one of the major centers of the city. And it is also likely the location This would be the temple that hosts the famed Palladium, which was a wooden image of Pallas Athena. It was part of the city's founding myth. It was said to provide protection. Specifically, it was believed and said that the city of Troy would not fall so long as the Palladium remained within its walls. That's the yes, if anybody has seen Nolan's film, the temple that is shown in the sacking of Troy is clearly a nod to this temple, and the big wooden stone, the big statue that's in there is obviously a nod, I would believe, probably to the Palladium. Now, according to the Iliad Mikra, which is called the Little Iliad, which was part of the whole Trojan War cycle of epics. This is one of the many, again, all of the epics except for the Iliad and the Odyssey have been lost. The Iliad and the Odyssey are the only ones that remain in their entirety. But we do know, it has been said in summaries and stuff that tell us about what happens in the Little Iliad, that Odysseus was the one who was sent to basically run covert ops. He and Diomedes are the only two who ever get involved in almost like covert ops. So Odysseus snuck into Troy by night. He was disguised as a beggar in order to steal the Palladium. Now, Helen mentions he's obviously done this a couple times. So Helen knows, like, that he does this. As we say, he was recognized actually by Helen. She told him where to go to find and steal the statue. So he went, he scoped out what it looked like, and he was like, okay, I know where it is. I don't think this is a one-man job. And he might have had to do some sneaky killing to get his way out. But he gets out, grabs Diomedes, and the two of them, again running a covert up, would later sneak back into the city and successfully steal the Palladium, at which point you're then eventually going to lead into the Trojan horse and everything else. So, well, Diomedes and Odysseus, again, they represent kind of two major aspects of Athena, which are, you know, the metis, the polymetis, like your intent, your cleverness, and bia, your force, your martial ability. And they both have great martial ability, and Odysseus really, though, is known for his cleverness. Literally doing Mission Impossible. Oh, yeah. Full Mission Impossible. Now, then we have this bit that Helenus adds, where he says, "Never once did we fear Achilles so, captain of armies born of a goddess too." Or so they say. And then he's talking about Diomedes. He says, "But here's a man, maniac, run amok. No one can match his fury man to man." Again, Diomedes is still in his Aristeia. He is a one-man army right now. He's scaring the shit out of everybody. Rightfully so. And I think that's important because it says, however good a warrior Achilles may be, and they do talk about him as if he is good enough that they notice when he is or isn't there. When he's on the field, you notice him. I would say, again, he's really quick. He's really agile. You will notice that if we're going to assume any of these guys are in something like Bronze Age armor, if you're moving quickly and agilely, people are going to notice that shit ain't exactly light. The Greeks were always kind of known for more heavy infantry. But Achilles has not had his moment of Aristeia. In the same vein that we got all of Diomedes' like exploits on the battlefield last book. No. We know that Achilles will have his moment later in the story, and it's, again, going to go across several books. It'll be even more kind of bonkers than Diomedes because he's in full ego death, so he's even more nuts. And again, what we're doing is what Helenus is saying by emphasizing that Diomedes, he's a maniac. He's a maniac. Maniac. The kind of superlative, the sort of superhuman excellence that comes especially in a moment of Aristeia. Again, as I say, you're a one-man army. Like, you are the one-man army action movie. Is this probable? Absolutely. Like, how is he doing that? You shouldn't be able to do that kind of thing. Achilles has natural talent. Achilles was also trained. Like, let's not make it... But Diomedes has the natural talent, and he has a lot more experience. I mean, everybody's got more experience than Achilles. He came in with the least experience of all the major named heroes. He has the least experience in any way. He did not participate in any hunts. He had never gone on any campaigns. Like, nothing. Not a thing. And Diomedes is one of the Epigonoi. He had been at the forefront of the most major and important military campaign, you would say, prior to the Trojan War, which is the 7 against Thebes / really the Epigonoi, because it's them. They're the ones who win. So he's already done the whole attritional siege war, and he won. He did what his father could not. And Diomedes, again, so like I said, Diomedes, he's the most militarily experienced, it seems, of all the Achaeans, because of the fact that they sieged the Polis Thebes. It was a walled city. The walls had even been reinforced since their fathers had done it. So they went against stronger walls and won. So, it's a big deal. Yeah, did what his dad could not under more difficult circumstances. Exactly. Darth Vader and Kylo Ren. More ominous dude, while Ren is the loose cannon. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah. Okay, I can kind of see that. And Achilles is a loose cannon. Again, I don't think the Iliad, for most of it, wants you to necessarily like Achilles. I mean, they're all of these guys aren't great, but Achilles is not presented in the best light from the beginning, let's be real. A lot of them aren't. Diomedes, though, rolls up, doesn't take Agamemnon's bait when Agamemnon just says the wrong thing and insults him because he's like trying to do like a Nestor-style speech and fails. And then Diomedes just goes nuts on the battlefield and still follows Athena's directions to don't fight other gods unless you see Daho Aphrodite, in which case, cut a bish. But even when he's going against, we'll say, Apollo in book 5, he's not really fighting Apollo. He's trying to get to Aeneas, and he's trying to fight the almost shield that Apollo put up. He's not really fighting Apollo. He wants to get to Aeneas until Apollo says, buddy, back up. At which point he does. He's like, I did get orders. And even when Athena goes, why are you running from Ares? He goes, well, you told me not to fight gods except for Aphrodite, which I did, by the way. I got that hoe. And she's like, oh, fuck that. We're going after Ares. So I'm like, damn. Oh, no. Well, she didn't initially say attack Ares. Initially, she said only go after Aphrodite. And then after, when she was like, why are you running from Ares? He says, well, you told me I could only smack Aphrodite, which I did. So, like, what do you mean? She goes, fuck that. We're going after Ares. that backstabbing bitch. We're going for him. So there we go. Yeah, and Achilles is there for Achilles. Ironically, yeah, again, Achilles didn't have to go. Patroclus had to be here in the war, by the way, because he was a suitor of Helen. He was bound by the Pact of Tyndareus. But Achilles is just here to murder people and die in a blaze of glory. That's all he's here for. So yeah, craziness. Anyway, so he urged, and Hector obeyed his brother start to finish. Down he leapt from his chariot, fully armed, hit the ground, and brandishing 2 spears, went striding down his lines, ranging flank to flank, driving his fighters into battle, rousing grisly war, and round the Trojans' world, bracing to meet the Argives face to face. And the Argives gave way. They quit the slaughter. They thought some god swept down from the starry skies to back the Trojans now. They wheeled and rallied so. Hector shouted out to his men in a piercing voice, gallant-hearted Trojans and far-famed allies, now be men, my friends, call up your battle fury, till I can return to Troy, and tell them all, the old counselors, all our wives, to pray to the gods, and vow to offer them many splendid victims. Pat was Helen's generation. Oh, Patroclus was older than Achilles, in case anybody did not realize. And he could have also just been super young when he met, like, he could have been just on the cusp of manhood when he went to go get, like, don't forget, there could have been a pretty good range of ages going to court Helen. It was everybody went for it. But yes, Patroclus is one of them. Yeah, giving once more unto the breach, dear friends. Oh, I could tangent on that. But yes, once more unto the breach, dear friends. As Hector turned for home, his helmet flashed, and the long dark hide of his bossed shield, the rim running the metal edge, drummed his neck and ankles. And now, Glaucus, son of Hippolochus and Tydeus' son Diomedes, met in the no-man's land between both armies, burning for battle, closing, squaring off, and the lord of the war cry Diomedes opened up. Who are you, my fine friend? Another born to die. I've never noticed you on the lines where we win glory. Not till now. But here you come, charging out in front of all the rest with such bravado, darting to face the flying shadow of my spear. Pity the one whose sons stand up to me in war. But if you are an immortal man come from the blue, I'm not the man to fight the gods of heaven. Not even Dryas' indestructible son Lycurgus. Not even he lived long, that fellow who tried to fight the deathless gods. He rushed at the Maenads once, nurses of wild Dionysus, scattered them breakneck down the holy mountain Nysa. A rout of them strewed their sacred staves on the ground, raked with the cattle prod by Lycurgus. Murderous fool. And Dionysus was terrified. He drove beneath the surf where the sea nymph Thetis pressed him to her breast. Dionysus, numb with fear, shivers racked his body, thanks to the raucous onslaught of that man. But the gods who live at ease lashed out against him. Worse, the son of Cronus struck Lycurgus blind. Nor did the man live long, not with the hate of all the gods against him. Okay, there's a whole story there. Whole bunch of characters, Xenia time. Almost. We're on the cusp of Xenia time. So, let's talk about Lycurgus and Maenads and Dionysos. There's a whole little micro-narrative that went on here. So, Lycurgus, his name literally translates as wolf work. It's sometimes translated as tamer of wolves. He was the king of Idoni in Thrace. He was a son of Dryas, as it was said here. Dryas literally means oak. And he was father to a son, who he also named Dryas. So So Lycurgus, son of Dryas, then had a son whom he named Dryas. So Dryas the second. We love an anime monologue in the middle of a pitched battle. You're going to get a lot of it. Now, as we heard, he very infamously banned the cult of Dionysus and imprisoned the god's followers, the Maenads, that were within his kingdom. As punishment for such an act of defiance and kind of sacrilege, of offending a god in such a way, and especially for the poor treatment, it is noted, of Dionysus' nursemaid, Ambrosia, Dionysus drove Lycurgus insane. It is said that Lycurgus ended up mistaking his son Dryas for a mature trunk of ivy, which is a plant that's sacred to Dionysus, and killed his son by pruning away his nose, ears, fingers, and toes. He thought he was pruning and cutting at ivy. Instead, he was killing his son. Now, in such a horrified reaction to such an act of filicide, which is a parent killing their child, yes, Dryas is related to the root word of dryad, which automatically links to druid. That I did not know, but that actually makes sense now that you say it. It said the land of Thrace, like the land itself, was so horrified at this act that it just dried up. So it went into a drought, nothing's growing. And Dionysus himself obviously declared that as long as Lycurgus remained unpunished for his grave injustice, Thrace would remain dry and barren, which is bad when you're an agricultural society. It said that now, according to Apollodorus, this is where, again, different strokes for different folks, different versions are going to go a little slightly different here. In the Apollodorus, in his Bibliotheki, said that Lycurgus' people captured and bound the king, flinging him alive and bound up, to man-eating horses on Mount Pangaius in order to save the land and therefore save themselves. And of course, with Lycurgus dead, Dionysus lifted the curse on the land of Thrace. Now, obviously, we heard that here in the Iliad, the gods blinded him. And he didn't live long after that anyway. Oh yes, the Maenads of Thrace. Don't worry, we'll talk about them. Don't worry. Now, Hyginus, it's always Hyginus who's going to come with some very esoteric, strange version, said he gave a slightly different version of how this whole thing even started up, right? Like, what caused Lycurgus to ban the cult of Dionysus? Well, Hyginus told us that after a night of very heavy wine drinking, so we were not imbibing responsibly here, Lycurgus tried to assault his own mother. Once he was sober, he was so angry and horrified at his own actions from when he was that drunk, I guess, he attempted to cut down all the nearby grapevines, claiming that wine was effectually bad medicine. Obviously, again, Dionysus drove him mad as punishment for this, because it's a blasphemous act. Like, buddy, don't blame the wine for what you were doing, which led to Lycurgus killing his own wife and son in this madness. Dionysus, of course, then threw Lycurgus, it says, to panthers on Mount Rhodope as punishment. So, different versions. Ultimately, the whole idea is, if you try to fight against a god, you will lose. Yeah, oh, ew. Everybody just saying ew, I get it. Now, this cult of Dionysus, these followers, we mentioned them, these Maenads, these nurses of wild Dionysus. The Maenads, also known as the Maenades. They are female followers of Dionysus and the most prominent members of his Thyasos. Now, the Thyasos is like the ecstatic kind of retinue of Dionysus. It's usually depicted as a very large procession of various drunken revelers. Bye, runs with cats. Yeah, oh, for goodness sake, I know. Now, often the maenads in this imagery you'll see of these kind of the Thyasos, the ecstatic sort of retinue. The maenads are usually going to be shown carrying the Thyrsos. The Thyrsos or the Tarsos, which is the sacred stave, I believe it was mentioned in there. They're sacred staves. Yes, the Thyrsos or the Thyrsoi. It's a staff that's wreathed in ivy and usually topped with a pine cone. Whatever. But yes, so ivy, the sacred plant of Dionysus, we mentioned. Now, etymologically, the name Maenad comes from the Greek word mainomai, which means to rave, to be mad, to rage, or to be angry. Maino, like Mayanese, it's all kind of tying in the same way, or manic. A lot of these are coming from the same sort of root words. So literally, the word Maenades, or the Maenads, translates as essentially the raving ones, the mad ones, essentially. They are usually portrayed as being inspired by Dionysus into a state of kind of ecstatic frenzy, something that occurs through a combination of dancing and intoxication, aka drunkenness. Gosh, we're all imbibing? I'm shocked. They're usually depicted also wearing like fawn skins. They wreathe ivy wreaths around their heads, and are sometimes even shown handling or wearing snakes. The imagery is pretty wild. I mean, literally wild, almost feral, you would think. Ultimately, this term Maenad kind of came That's why I say, if there's actual issues, they'll run. Thank you, Peg. Thank you. I don't know what they're barking at. Peg? Man, don't you start shit. Thank you. Yes, that was Peg. Dogs heard raving ones and got inspired, it's true. They're like, we're down! Woo! But then barking and chaos, I know. And Peg had to have the last word, of course. So, the Maenad comes to be associated with a wide variety of women who are supernatural, mythological, even historical, and they're all associated ultimately with the god and of Dionysus and the worship of Dionysus. She does have the most polite bark of all of them. It's because she doesn't bark that much, but they get her to bark. Now, very famously, there's a play by Euripides, our buddy Euripides, called the Bacchae, and it says it is the Maenads of Thebes who murder King Pentheus after he bans the worship of Dionysus. Crazy story. King Pentheus was actually a cousin of Dionysus who did this. And yet, Dionysus himself is the one who lures Pentheus out to the woods where the Maenads tear him apart. In fact, Pentheus' own mother, Agaue, is a part of this group of women, these Maenads, and even in like this sort of ecstatic madness, mutilates her son's body by tearing off his head because she believes it to be that of a lion. It's true. She barks. They pay attention. And as was mentioned, I think it was Agnes. Yep, Agnes got it right. It is Maenads who kill Orpheus after his failed attempt to return Eurydice from the underworld. They did so because, Orpheus is so deep in his grief and mourning his wife that he refused to play his lyre and entertain these like kind of half wild, mad women. So they tore him limb from limb. So those are the man, and that's why that's why you don't fuck around and find out. I mean, with any of the gods, but definitely not Dionysus and his Maenads. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, has somebody returned? One. Hi, Bear. Okay, hi, Bear. Thank you. It was like I heard tippy taps. Maenads wanted Wonderwall, didn't get it. Yep, exactly. So there you go with all of that. And then finally, there's the bit where Dionysus is terrified and he dives beneath the surf and, Thetis presses him to her breast, like holds him like, it's okay, kiddo. This portrait of like a frightened Dionysus that takes refuge with Thetis, it's a pretty massive contrast to later depictions, especially when I just told you what happens in the Bacchae, which is obviously written several centuries later. And you might think that, like, well, this is kind of these are incongruous with each other. Like, why is he terrified in one, and then he's, terrified, goes from terrified to terrifying? And I would say you consider the unpredictable effects of wine and excess drinking and the emotional fluctuation that comes with extreme intoxication, and the lack of essentially emotional stability any of these people have and these gods have. Honestly, to me, the different depictions make sense. That's not even considering the culture and political climate surrounding the composition of each work, these attitudes towards drinking, and like, I think it's totally understandable that in one story he's terrified and runs to Phoebus, and then in another story he's like terrifying and just lashes out. I'm like, honestly, it makes sense. I don't think it's incongruous. You're beyond 3 sheets to the wind of Dionysus ever says you've had enough. You're probably dead before that happens. I mean, alcohol poisoning is gonna happen. Even AA couldn't save Dionysus, it's true. Or anybody associated with him. All right. Here we go. He goes, "No, my friend. I've no desire to fight the blind immortals. But if you're a man who eats the crops of the earth, a mortal born for death, here, come closer. The sooner you'll meet your day to die." The noble son of Hippolochus answered staunchly, "High-hearted son of Tydeus, why ask about my birth? Like the generations of leaves, the lives of mortal men, now the wind scatters the old leaves across the earth. Now the living timber bursts with the new buds, and spring comes round again. And so with men, as one generation comes to life, another dies away. Don't you dare bark. Go, shoo, go get them. I can hear barking outside. Go on. Do you want to join them? Go get them." He's gonna bark, I know it. It's just Moose, isn't it? Hi, Charlie. It is Moose out there yelling. Moose is yelling at dead squirrels. One generation comes to life, another dies away. But about my birth, if you'd like to learn it well, first to last, though many people know it, here's my story. There's a city, Corinth, deep in a bend of Argos, good stallion country, where Sisyphus used to live, the wiliest man alive. Sisyphus, Iolaus' son, who had a son named Glaucus, and in his day Glaucus sired brave Bellerophon, a man without a fault. Okay. This is where we're going to take a big tangent, and we're going to talk about some bloodlines. Because you heard some names mentioned. We're talking about a bloodline, but this is a pretty important bloodline. We are sharing stories. Yep, we're already asking, where are you from? What's happening? So, we talked about Sisyphus, Iolaus' son, who had a son named Glaucus, and in his day, Glaucus sired brave Bellerophon. So, first, let's talk about Iolaus. I'm going to go in chronological order here in terms of this bloodline. So we'll start with Iolaus. This is not to be mistaken with the Iolaus from the Odyssey. This is not the man who's the keeper of the NMY, keeper of the winds. Not the same one. Different guy, same name. He is a son of Hellen, spelled Hellen, who is the eponymous progenitor of the Hellenes, or the Hellenes, aka what the Greeks call themselves ultimately. He's the ruler of Iolia, which later is called Thessaly. He is the eponym of the Iolians, who are one of the four primary tribes of the Hellenes. You're going to get all these tribes. This is a pretty big tangent. Now, Apollodorus says that Iolaus was the father of 7 sons: Creteus, Atamas, Salmoneus, Dion, Magnes, Pereres, and Sisyphus, as well as 5 daughters: Alcyone, Pisidaike, Chalke, Perimede, and Kanake. Now, in the mythic tradition, it's actually said that Iolaus is said to have either killed Kanake or forced her to commit suicide because she had committed an incestuous affair with her brother Marcarius. This bloodline will not give Atreus a run for their money, but they're important. They're not quite as messy, though that's kind of messy. Now, Iolaus is the grandson of Deucalion, which made him a great-grandson of Prometheus. It's a pretty insane bloodline. The Alcyone. Yeah, I believe it is the Alcyone. I believe so. Let me double check, though. This is already going to be... Alcyone. Yep. The princess for Alcyone and... is it Ceyx? Ceyx and her husband. They got in trouble because they compared themselves to Zeus and Hera. That one? Yeah, that's who that is. I know, yeah. They're messy. I don't know if they're quite as bad as Atreus. Like, that bloodline is just so bad. Yep, that is Alcyone. So, now, as I said, Iolaus is the grandson of Deucalion. Now, Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha are very famous because they survived a great primordial flood that covered much, if not all, of Greece. It's sometimes said that this is also part of that folk memory of what happened after Mount Terra blew its top over on Santorini, which likely could have caused tsunamis and massive flooding. Like, again, all this folk memory kind of gets weaved in there. Yep. Deucalion of the flood. Yeah, that Deucalion, the guy who survived the flood, exactly. I love everybody's catching all these references. So many references, guys. Now, it is said from Deucalion and his wife sprang a whole new race of people that ended up repopulating a lot of central Greece and the western Peloponnese. So this is a lot of kind of this is their sort of human mythic origins here. And again, we're talking about these people who are all forming the four primary tribes. So Deucalion had a son, Helen, as we mentioned it before, with two L's, who produced four sons, who ultimately them or their children ended up being the eponymous founders, again, of these four major Greek tribes. So you have the Dorians, who were said to come from Helen's son, Dorus. You have the Iolians, who are said to have come from Iolus. Now you have the Achaeans, who are said to have come from Achaeus, who was the son of Zutus, who was a son of Helen. So this is a grandson of Helen, who founds the ultimately is the beginning of the Achaeans, and another grandson of Helen, another one of Zutus' sons, named Ion, leads to the Ionians. These four major tribes of the Greeks. This is a pretty prestigious bloodline that this guy is coming from, which is why he says, everybody knows my bloodline. It's kind of an important bloodline. But, I mean, other than being this kind of great progenitor of mythology, Iolaus doesn't really have any other mythology of note of himself. He's just really known for being kind of the progenitor of all these. Now, as we said, he has a very famous son named Sisyphus. Yeah, that's Sisyphus. Okay. He's an infamous figure of Greek mythology for his actions that ultimately land him in Tartarus with a particularly creative eternal punishment. He's having a great time down there at the Hard Rock Cafe. He was the founder and king of Ephyra, which obviously is called Corinth here. Corinth's ancient name is Ephyra. A lot of people, if they're doing the translations, might just change it to Corinth because people are more likely to recognize that now. And he's formerly, obviously, a Thessalian prince who's a son of Iolaus. He's the husband of the Pleiad nymph Merope and father of Ornithion, who's sometimes known as Porphyrion. He's obviously the father of Glaucus, of Tersander and Almos. He's also the grandfather of Bellerophon via Glaucus. Now, while Sisyphus was the king of Ephyra, he founded the Isthmian Games to honor the Boeotian prince Melicertes, who's sometimes later called Palaemon, because the corpse of Melicertes was brought to the shore of the Isthmus of Corinth by a dolphin, supposedly, according to Pausanias. So Pindar also claims that he founded the Isthmian Games, but he says it was upon the instructions of a group of nymphs. Pindar, who has his infamous version of what happens in the story of Tantalus. Oh, Pindar. Now, we're going to get to Bellerophon. Don't worry, we're just not there yet. Again, this is a big bloodline, and we should talk about them all, because they're famous. We're not mentioning them for no reason. This is a famous bloodline. Now, Sisyphus was noted for his acrimony, we'll say, with his brother Salmoneus. Basically, they did not get along at all. And Salmoneus even, it was the notedly, as they said, wicked eponymous king and founder of Salmone in Pisatis, which is archaic Pisa. Now, again, archaic Pisa is in Greece. This is not Pisa in Italy. That's why you call it archaic Pisa. It's completely different. So Sisyphus, because obviously they don't get along, and because this is just what brothers do when they don't get along, he went to the oracle at Delphi and asked, how do I kill my brother without incurring any sort of severe consequences? This is a theme. How do I do things without having to bear the consequences of my actions? This is a theme with Sisyphus, by the way. The oracle at Delphi told him that he had to seduce his own niece, Salmoneus' daughter, Tidal. So he went ahead and did just that. Of course he did. Salmonella. So, however, so he seduces his niece. It's weird. Tyro, they would sleep together. In fact, she would bear him children. She would, however, later she slew the children that she bore to Sisyphus when she found out and realized that Sisyphus planned to use them to overthrow her father, which frankly I think is super tragic, both for the kids and for her. She got used. I feel for the kids because they did nothing wrong. But Sisyphus, like I said, he's not a nice guy. I have no sympathy for Sisyphus. He's a complete dick. Now, if the oracle said so, why not? There's Mariana. Mariana, I knew you were lurking in here somewhere. Why not? Look, that's exactly what the Estes said when the oracle said you gotta essay your own daughter and father your own grandchild. Why not? Really did. That to me is red flags. And immediately yeah, no. Okay. As one does. Throws up a little. Now let's get to the story he is most infamous for, as into how does he really get on the shit list of the gods? Greek mythology. In return for a spring that would flow through the Corinthian Acropolis, or from the Corinthian Acropolis, I can speak. Incest, yeah. And stuff like this is frowned upon, by the way. Stuff like that. You're like, buddy. It happens. It's essentially a kind of endogamy. A lot of, those who are in power want to keep it within the bloodline to a degree, but, yeah. Anyway, in return for a spring that would flow from the Corinthian Acropolis, Sisyphus told the river god Asopus where Zeus had taken the god's daughter, the Asopid Aegina. He narked. He was a snitch. But not a snitch. He was a snitch. This earned him Zeus's eternal ire. And he was now permanently basically on the shit list of the king of the gods. You're a snitch. Snitches get stitches. So Zeus wanted to punish Sisyphus for being a snitch and to snitch on the king. What? Again, he likes to do things and goes, and how do I avoid the consequences? So basically Zeus said, snitches get stitches. He called in a favor to Thanatos of all people. This just does feel extreme. He could have just sent Hermes. Frankly, I feel like Hermes could have handled Sisyphus, but okay. He sent Thanatos to go and collect the mortal king. Basically, you go take him. Now, in some later versions, it's Hades and not Thanatos who's sent to do this errand. Regardless, I just joined. I am late. That's fine. Sisyphus basically saw Thanatos coming. I'm pretty sure you go, and that's the looming specter of death coming at me, literal death. And found a crafty way to bind Thanatos in chains, some sort of special chains that would bind Thanatos. Now, the problem with that kind of entrapment, he tied him up and then basically skedaddled. He lured him to a spot, tied him up, skedaddled. The problem is that while Thanatos is bound in this way, no mortal is able to die, which is a problem. Because it meant Hades essentially had to start delivering humans to Thanatos in person. He's like, this is fucking stupid. Zeus, can you get Hephaestus and the Cyclopes to help me out? What the fuck is going on? This is a problem for Hades. This is a nightmare. Can you imagine the paperwork going on in the underworld? He's like, no, this is below my pay grade. I'm not dealing with this. So eventually they had to free Thanatos from his chains. Now, obviously Sisyphus had realized when he tried to avoid the consequences of his actions and therefore did more actions, he wanted to avoid those consequences. Again, we continue in the train. They knew they would demand his demise because, dude, you are fucking around and finding out on a new level. This is special at this point. Yeah, this is why we delegate shit. It's supply chain disruption on a cosmic scale. Again, having failed to send Thanatos to him, the king Sisyphus knew that he's still in trouble. He's thinking, how do I avoid all consequences? He tells his wife, again, Merope, not to send him to death with all of the customary gifts and rites. There's a whole process you do with this. Oh, excuse me. Hi. Hello, Peg. Hello, are you coming here? Yes, okay, come here. Yes, very good girl. Now his wife, mind you, she is a nymph, but she's looking at him sideways like, what? Oh, okay. He's like, no, I'm gonna march myself down to the underworld. So you're gonna say that I died. But like, don't give me a funeral, don't give me the rites, don't give me the gifts, don't do all the things. And she's looking at him like, okay, what are you up to? But okay, I mean, she's his wife. Again, in this world, women are property. They have like no rights. She has to listen to him, essentially. So, and it is also important to remember, in this way, this death, and we're seeing air quotes here, this demise of Sisyphus, he's not actually dead. His psyche, his soul did not leave his body, right? So he walks his living ass down to Hades saying, well, they're going to demand my demise. But he's got a plan. He's doing this on purpose. Boys, thank you. It's a car. Thank you. Charlie, come here. Thank you. It was very nice. Can we lie down now? Charlie, thank you. Yeah, okay, thank you for that bark. It was very nice. Yeah, even they're just like, oh my God, this dude won't quit. Yeah, he won't quit. He never quits. Okay, thank you. We're done now. Excellent. We can. The mightiest howl from Peg. I know. Live Cerber, except we've got technically 4 dogs. So Cerberus plus 1. I mean, really, these 3 are Cerberus plus Peg. So he walks his living ass down to the underworld. And Hades and Persephone are kind of shocked to see the state that he's in because he doesn't look like some sort of Greek king. They're like, isn't he a king? They're like, isn't he a king? I thought he was king. That's the guy. Yeah, that's the guy and Hades is like, this motherfucker. And he's just like, wait a minute. Why do you look like that? Why do you look like that? What's going on? And he frankly looks terrible. It's so undignified that he was not given any sort of proper rights or anything like that. And he tells them, well, it's all my wife's fault. Can you believe my wife? She's so disloyal, so terrible. She did not give me rights. She didn't honor me. Like, can you believe this happened to me? My wife, who I've done everything for. All of this. Can you believe she did that? Now, Hades and Persephone are obviously only hearing him. Sus. I know, super sus. Yeah, he's like, where's the loot? He's just like, my wife, it's all going. Can you believe that? He goes, were I alive, wink, wink, were I back up there, I could scold her for behaving so badly. I mean, who does she think she is? And they're like, you know what? You're fucking right. Hades and Persephone literally say, well, you know what you gotta do? You gotta go back. You need to scold her, basically. You need to tell her to send all your shit down with you and then come back with all your shit. Yeah, Karen told me you're not paying taxes. He's like, well, my wife's so good. It's like, so go tell your wife to pay the fucking taxes and come back with all the fucking taxes. So, of course, this is like, you're absolutely right. I should go back. Do you think he returned to the underworld after scolding his wife, which he didn't do? He was like, babes, told you my plan would work out. So he just stays there. And frankly, at this point, the gods are like, whatever, he's going to die anyway. At this point, the gods are like, we're fucking exhausted, we're moving on. And just, like, there you go. Notoriously not omniscient. No, they're not all omniscient. That's sort of the crazy thing. So, yeah, he then eventually dies of old age. And when his shade, his psyche, his soul finally gets to the underworld where there is no escape, Sisyphus gets his famous punishment to roll a boulder up a hill. Come on. Oh yeah, no, they're like, it's a technicality. They're like, motherfucker. To bring out the boulder of Hades. Yeah, the boulder. Get the boulder. So he is forced to constantly roll a massive boulder up a hill. It's that every time he gets near the top, it slips and rolls back down, leaving him to start over again, like ad infinitum. This is what he does for the rest of his deathly existence. And of course the Erinyes are around all screeching bloody murder and, doing their thing. Moose, I know, I know you're distressed. There's really not room here for you, puppy. I know you want to perch. He's gonna try. Tax evasion. Yeah, it's like, this is what you get for tax evasion. Well, and a bunch of other stuff. I mean, he really was a pain in their ass. Eat some of the dirt. Okay, are you good? Okay, there we go. All right, Moose. Moose is right next to where my phone is, so if you hear Moose, Moose agrees. He also hates tax evasion. He also likes to perch on top of the couch pillows. Now, we did note, of course, we're not talking about Sisyphus. We talked that Sisyphus had a son named Glaucus. Like I said, he usually gets... Now, Glaucus, this is not the Glaucus we have now. This is Glaucus's grandfather. Again, we sort of skip a generation and name everybody the same thing. So this is Glaucus, the grandfather of Glaucus, the son of Sisyphus. He's usually surnamed as Pontineus, because he's often labeled as the king of Pontinii in Boeotia. And sometimes he's also labeled as the king of Ephyra, of Corinth. It kind of depends on who you read, again. No, he's literally Al Capone. They get him for tax evasion. Yeah, the Untouchables version of Sisyphus. This is literally Al Capone. He does all this shit, but we caught him on tax evasion. Oh. Now, he is, of course, as I said, Glaucus is the son of Sisyphus and Meropes, one of the Pleiades. The Pleiades, I said she was a Pleiad nymph. The Pleiades, these are daughters of Atlas, the Titans. That's her lineage. Sisyphus initially tried to arrange a marriage for Glaucus with the daughter of King Erysichthon of Thessaly, but she ended up eluding Glaucus, and she was actually taken to an island by Poseidon. So she was like, nah, I don't want to, and Poseidon was like, say less, babes, I got you. Now, Glaucus eventually marries the daughter of King Nisos in Megara, and this daughter is named either Eurynome or Eurymede. It kind of depends on the source. So I might flip. I think most commonly I'm probably going to call her Eurynome for this. Oh yeah, at least the Greeks skip a generation. The Romans were like, hey, you're son of XYZ, then you're called XYZ, and your son will be... Yeah, the Romans, like, God, it's very annoying. Yeah, at least the Greeks will be like, so... Who's your dad? Bellerophon. Who's your grandpa? Glaucus. Isn't your name Glaucus? Yeah, but they couldn't have Glaucus, son of Glaucus. So I'm Glaucus, grandson of Glaucus. Now, Zeus claimed that Glaucus would sire no children, even by his wife. So while the Iliad names him as the father of Bellerophon by his wife, oftentimes, or usually, it is said that it is Poseidon who is seen as the true father of Bellerophon, and Glaucus is rather like Tyndareus. He is the father who stepped up. However, Glaucus is also said to have fathered Alcamenes, who's sometimes either called Beliades or Peiren, who ends up getting unintentionally killed by Bellerophon. So, like... all the different stories, it means you have a mess. So, the most famous myth of Glaucus pretty much involves his really rather grisly death at the hands, or I guess we should say the hooves of his own horse. Actually, it's not even just the hooves. At the death of his own horses. He dies at the hands of the hooves, the teeth of his own horses. And that's because Glaucus participated in the funeral games of Pelias, who was the king of Iolcus and the uncle of Jason, the one who sent him on that quest for the Golden Fleece, which was hosted by the late king's son, Acastos. Now, there were a lot of famous heroes, including Argonauts, obviously, who competed in these games. They are known as the Athla Epipelia. Now, Glaucus ended up actually losing in... the big thing he was there for the chariot race. Now, he ended up losing the chariot race to Oilaos, and he actually also perished in the race. I said he's really known for his grisly death. It is said that Glaucus fed his horses human flesh to make them fierce in battle. We have a thing about man-eating horses, guys. They appear all over the place. But at Pelias' funeral games, he had no supply of human flesh for them. Thus, as he was losing the chariot race, they turned on Glaucus and devoured him instead. This is why you don't get weird with your animal's diet. Just saying. Now, Pausanias, who's kind of like geographic historian, we'll call it. He's got a very famous work where he's talking about all these different places in Greece and giving like mythological origins and shit. Pausanias said that the Taraxippus at the Isthmian Games was due to Glaucus being killed by his horses during those funeral games. Now, a Taraxippus literally translates as like horse disturber. Essentially, it's a dangerous sight that's blamed for frightening horses at a hippodrome. So basically, if there's a particular spot where the horses are all like, I don't fucking like this, and they start freaking out, you just go, Taraxippus. It's a bad place. It's cursed. It's haunted. And it's usually outside a hippodrome, which, I mean, I can imagine horses are getting all riled up. I mean, think race horses. You have to keep them calm, but they can get riled. Same idea, we're just doing chariots. So, now, we come to Bellerophon, who's the father of the Glaucus who's here fighting at Troy. Bellerophon, pretty famous guy. He sometimes is also known in some sources as Hipponos, which means horse knower, and which, I mean, I guess sort of comes into play because of his connection with the Pegasus, but his name Bellerophon does seem to come from a combination of the words belos, which means like projectile or really javelin, essentially, and fontes, because Bellerophontes is really more accurate to the Greeks, which means slayer. So that would mean his name is translated as essentially he who slays with a javelin. It could also sometimes just be translated as slayer of Belleros, if you're assuming Bellerol is a name, or javelin slayer. Like, I think he who slays with a javelin makes sense, given the Chimaira. If the horses hate the vibes, you know it's bad. It's true. Trust your horses. If the horses are spooked, get the fuck out of there. Of course, Bellerophon is the son of Eurynome, or Eurymede, and Poseidon, who's obviously but raised as the son of his human foster father, the stepfather, the father who stepped up, Glaucus, before he died, grossly. He's the brother of Achaemenes, again, who is sometimes called Deliades or Peirin, who it is said he kind of unintentionally killed. He will end up marrying Philonoi, or Philonoi? I'm gonna go with Philonoi, whose name literally means mind of the people, or like loving intellect, who's the daughter of King Iobates of Lycia. Obviously his grandsons Sarpedon and Glaucus, who is here, fight in the Trojan War on the side of the Trojans. So, now, we did mention, he may or may not, intentionally or not, he did apparently kill his half-brother. He's exiled from his hometown for this. So kinslaying was a pretty big deal. That wasn't taken lightly. You get a lot of people who are often exiled from their hometowns for kinslaying. It happens all over the place. So because he did a murder of a family member, he's exiled from Ephyra, from Corinth. And so he ends up pleading with King Proetus of Tyrines to help ritually cleanse him of his crime. You can go through these long processes, this intense process, I believe, being ritually cleansed. Like Circe did it with Medea and Jason. So here he's gone to this King Proetus and said, hey, ritually cleanse me. Proetus agrees. They're going through the ritual cleansing process. He's, staying there. But while Bellerophon is there, Proetus' wife, the Queen Antea, falls for Bellerophon and makes a pass at him. Now, Bellerophon rejects her. These are unwanted advances. He's like, no, I'm good, thanks. She does not take rejection well, so she turns around and accuses Bellerophon of making unwanted advances towards her. I would say if anybody here is familiar with the myth of Hippolytus, who is the son of Theseus, there's a dark parallel there. Like it's the same kind of situation in a way where somebody gets turned down and then they say, actually, that person tried to assault me. They made unwanted advances. Obviously, it ends in serious tragedy for Hippolytus because Theseus believes this and gets Poseidon to do him a favor and contribute to the death of Hippolytus. In this case, Proetus, obviously he believes his wife. I mean, look, that's his wife. If she says, hey, that guy made unwanted advances at me, he believes her. Now, Proetus doesn't want to kill his guest. He's thinking about Xenia, and he's a little like, ooh, I mean, given I just ritually cleansed him, like, where am I at in the standing point here? So instead of potentially doing something wrong, because, she's saying he did this, Bellerophon's saying I didn't, What he does instead, he exiles Bellerophon to the kingdom of his father-in-law, Iobates. So, but what he does is he has Bellerophon carry a sealed tablet that bears the message, essentially, please remove this bearer from the world, please get rid of this guy. He attempted to violate my wife, your daughter. Now, of course, Bellerophon, it's sealed, he's not opening it. He doesn't realize what's going on here. He's like, fine, I'll go. Iobates, mind you, hosts Bellerophon for like over a week before he actually ends up opening the tablet. So he's getting to know Bellerophon and all this, and he doesn't know what this tablet says. And then he does, and then he too is like, well, now I'm definitely bound by Xenia, because you haven't done anything in my house. That's my daughter, but she's now under the house of her husband. Like, fuck, I am definitely under Xenia. I can't kill Bellerophon. So, he does what a lot of kings do when they want to get rid of somebody. You send them on a quest. Tag, you're it. Oh yeah, they're all passing the... He decides to send Bellerophon on a quest. A mission. Which, look, everybody's competitive. They like a good quest. They like a good challenge. So he says, hey, Bellerophon, he sends him on a mission to kill the Chimera, a seemingly impossible to survive mission, which is, they're all seemingly impossible to survive. That's the whole point of why you want to complete it and get the good Kleos. The Chimera, of course, is a fire-breathing monster that has the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent. It is one of the various monstrous children of Typhon and Echidna. So, yeah. Yeah, fun times. So, of course, Bellerophon's just like, sounds cool, I'm all down for a quest. He sets off. On the way, he does meet a seer named Palaidos, who tells him, you're on a quest. The Chimera, huh? Yeah, you're gonna need the Pegasus to succeed in this task. Which, of course, the Pegasus, as we know, it's a winged horse. It's usually depicted as a white stallion. It's the child of Poseidon as the horse god, and the Gorgon Medusa after she had her head lopped off. It's a wild winged horse right now, basically. He's special, hence he's, lives basically forever. Now, in order to obtain the Pegasus, Bellerophon sleeps in the temple of Athena. Maybe he'll get divine inspiration, which he basically does. Most versions, she appears to him in a dream. I apparently wrote in a drive, good for me, and bestows upon him a golden bridle that she says he must show to Poseidon while sacrificing a white bull to the god. Now, a seer whose name is literally the one who sees many things. I know, so much significant naming everywhere. Now, there are a lot of versions of how exactly does Bellerophon tame the Pegasus. Because, it's wild. It's why you need a special bridle. You gotta get it, right? So version 1, Bellerophon realizes he needs to approach the Pegasus while it's drinking from the Pyrene spring, which is on the citadel of Corinth. Get it with the bridle he got from Athena, so that's version 1. Version 2 says that Athena just brings him the Pegasus, already tamed and bridled, and is like, here you go, good luck. The third version is that Poseidon brings Bellerophon the Pegasus, again, bridled and ready to go, and says, good luck. Most of the versions I know is that he has to approach, the most common one I know is that he approaches the Pegasus, but of course, again, multiple versions, different strokes, different folks. Regardless, eventually he acquires the Pegasus. We have now gotten our means of transport. So he flies back to Lycia on its back, but finds he still cannot harm the Chimera. He's trying to get it, he's having a lot of trouble. He's having trouble approaching it. It breathes fire, after all. But the fact that it breathes fire and has this fiery or very hot breath gives Bellerophon an idea. A little bit of the Sisyphus action takes place in his brain. It's actually a pretty good idea. He mounts a large block of lead upon the end of his spear, his javelin, his weapon, his pointy stick. And holding that spear out as far as he can. He gets as close and yet as far as he can. He flies straight at the Chimera and lodges that block of lead in its throat. Now, of course, that fiery breath then melts that lead almost immediately, because we're talking super hot. Think dragon breath, basically. Which then, that liquid lead, that melted lead, blocks its airways and essentially kills the Chimera. It suffocates to death. It can't breathe, because the lead just blocks and coats everything. And he slays the Chimera. Look, admittedly, That's pretty fucking clever. You give props where they're due, even when people are then stupid. So Bellerophon returns victorious, but King Iobates doesn't believe him. I mean, he's also like, I've been told that you tried to assault my daughter, so I'm not your fan. Anyway, whether or not he actually does believe him, he says he doesn't. This ends up leading Bellerophon to embark on a whole bunch of quests and adventures. It will ultimately culminate in him. He does eventually marry Iobates' daughter, Philonoe. And so he ends up actually also then being given half of Iobates' kingdom. So eventually it seems they mend fences and it's fine. Of course, as we say, his death is stupid. He comes to a tragic end because of his own hubris. Because his ability to ride upon the Pegasus, like he's totally forgetting it has a magic bridle that makes him able to do this, makes him believe he deserves to fly to the top of Mount Olympus, to the home of the gods. Because obviously that logics, but again, he is in the bloodline of Sisyphus. Let's fuck around and find out. And in his anger at the audacity, Zeus sends a massive gadfly to like bite or sting, whatever it does, the Pegasus. Which of course, look, if you've ever been bitten or stung suddenly by a massive insect, Pegasus bucks violently. Don't blame it. I would too be like, what the fuck? And this throws Bellerophon off the Pegasus's back. Mind you, the Pegasus completes its flight to Olympus, no problem. Zeus is like, you're going to be the pack horse for my thunderbolt, which is a pretty big honor, so that's cool. Now, what happens to Bellerophon? Well, there's a couple of versions. One, the fall to the earth kills him. Duh. Like, you fall to your death. It's a pretty big fall. Version 2 is he falls, but he lands in a thorn bush, which blinds him. And so he lives out the rest of his life in misery on the plain of Iliad, which is like wandering, I think is what that word translates as. And eventually he dies and he's miserable. And it's just like, either way, play stupid games, win stupid fucking prizes. So this is the bloodline of Glaucus who we're meeting. So when he says, everybody knows my bloodline, he's not kidding. Everybody knows the bloodline. So, as in his day Glaucus sired brave Bellerophon, a man without a fault. The gods gave him beauty, and the fine gallant traits to go with men. But Proetus plotted against him. Far stronger, the king in his anger drove him out of Argos, the kingdom Zeus had brought beneath his scepter. Proetus' wife, you see, was mad for Bellerophon. The lovely Antheia lusted to couple with him, all in secret. Futile, she could never seduce the man's strong will, his seasoned, firm resolve. So straight to the king she went, blurting out her lies. I wish you'd die, Proetus, if you don't kill Bellerophon. Bellerophon's bent on dragging me down with him in lust, though I fight him all the way. All of it false, but the king seethed when he heard a tale like that. He balked at killing the man. He did some respect at least. But he quickly sent him off to Lycia, gave him tokens, murderous signs, scratched in a folded tablet, and many of them too, enough to kill a man. He told him to show them to Antheia's father. That would mean his death, if the father had opened it before the guy got in his house. So off he went to Lycia, safe in the escort of the gods, and once he reached the broad highlands cut by the rushing Xanthus, the king of Lycia gave him a royal welcome. 9 days he feasted, 9 oxen slaughtered. When the 10th dawn shone with her rose-red fingers, he began to question him, asked to see his credentials, whenever he brought him from his in-law, Proetus. But then, once he received that fatal message, sent from his own daughter's husband, first, he ordered Bellerophon to kill the Chimera. Grim monster sprung of the gods, nothing human, all lion in front, all snake behind, all goat between, terrible, blasting lethal fire at every breath. But he laid her low, obeying signs from the gods. Next he fought the Solymi, tribesmen bent on glory, roughest battle of men he ever entered, so he claimed. Then for a third test he brought the Amazons down, a match for men in war. But as he turned back, his host spun out the mightiest trap of all. Picking the best men from Lycia far and wide, he set an ambush. They never came home again. Fearless Bellerophon killed them all. Then, yes, when the king could see the man's power at last, a true son of the gods, he pressed him hard to stay. He offered his own daughter's hand in marriage. He gave him half his royal honors as king. And the Lycians carved him out a grand estate, the choicest land in the realm, rich in vineyards and good-tilled fields for him to lord it over. And his wife bore good Bellerophon 3 children, Isander, Hippolochus, and Laodamia. Laodamia lay in the arms of Zeus, who rules the world, and she bore the god a son. our great commander Sarpedon, helmed in bronze. But the day soon came when even Bellerophon was hated by all the gods. Across the Ilian plain he wandered, all alone, eating his heart out, a fugitive on the run from the beaten tracks of men. His son Isander, killed by the war god, never sated, a boy fighting the Solymi, always out for glory. Laodamia, Artemis, flashing her golden reins, cut her down in anger. But Hippolochus fathered me, I'm proud to say. He sent me off to Troy, and I hear his urgings ringing in my ears. Always be the best, my boy, the bravest, and hold your head up high above the others. Never disgrace the generations of your fathers. They were the bravest champions born in Corinth, in Lycia far and wide. There, you have my lineage. That is the blood I claim, my royal birth. When he heard that, Diomedes' spirits lifted. Raising his spear, the lord of the war cry drove it home, planting it deep down in the earth that feeds us all. With winning words, he called out to Glaucus, the young captain. Splendid! You are my friend, my guest from the days of our grandfathers long ago. And that is where Xenia rears its head also even here. So, this is a moment in which what Bellerophon, oh my god, what Diomedes and Glaucus are going to do, they are going to renew these tides of Xenia and what is called Xenos, which comes from Xenia, which is like guest friendship. Like, you sort of say that like once you've hosted one another, you're kind of bound, right? Glaucus is more Greek than Diomedes. They're both pretty Greek. But yes, so, and this, what's about to happen here, I mean, look, they were about to fight. Then they found out they're kind of connected in a way through Xenia, because we mentioned Argos and all of this, and all of a sudden, they just stopped fighting. And this is an anomaly in the interactions that we have seen till now, or we will continue to see. I mean, look, we just saw the, hey, we're not ransoming prisoners. This became, we don't need to fight. We're friends. Like, we have ties. So instead, essentially, again, of engaging in combat, instead, these two men, these two warriors, return to a social institution that's based not on an exhibition of personal prowess and of strength, which again, it's always meet force with equal and or greater force. Instead, this is a recognition of mutual vulnerability. That's what Xenia is. It's a recognition that one guest friend, your host, will take you in because your guest friend, your guest, is far from home. They don't have the resources they would normally have. It's giving Christmas football from World War I. A little bit. It's kind of a moment of that. Now, I think this is important because if you remember our introductory session when we talked a bit about Aristeia and we talked about how what happens with Achilles over the course of his anger and his rage, which climaxes in his moment of Aristeia where he just goes nuts on the battlefield. The point is that the story's not going to end until that anger is satisfied, basically until he returns down, after the moment of Aristeia, back to the community. He's no longer godlike, he's returning to the community values, returning to that of mortality. This is what's happening with Diomedes here. Remember, we had Diomedes all pumped up, all rage, and he's scaring the shit out of the Trojans. As we mentioned at the start of this book, he's been all in his Aristeia. This is the moment he returns back down. He's returned back down. He goes, oh yeah, Xenia, this thing that's a moral constant in the Odyssey that's like really important to all of us. Hey, what do you know? Wild story. He returns down to the values of the community. It's, so reaffirming Xenia is his reaffirmation of humanity. It's his return to the community. And this is huge because we're going to see essentially a different version of this later play out with Achilles. There's a lot of moments that happen in these earlier books which are some sort of foreshadowing of what eventually has to happen with Achilles. So, introduce the reputation, go over the... I didn't know the samurai did that. That kind of makes sense. So this is important, and we're going to continue with this reaffirmation of Xenia being like, hey, cool, like, no, we're friends, we won't fight, and they're going to do an armor exchange. So we're going to read a bit about that, and then we're going to talk about the armor exchange. Again, splendid, you are my friend, my guest from the days of our grandfathers long ago. Noble Oeneus hosted your brave Bellerophon once. He held him there in his halls 20 whole days, and they gave each other handsome gifts of friendship. My kinsman offered a gleaming sword belt, rich red. Bellerophon gave a cup two-handled, solid gold. I left it at home when I set out for Troy. My father, Tydeus, I don't really remember. I was just a baby when my father left me then. That time an Achaean army went to die at Thebes. So now, I am your host and friend in the heart of Argos. You are mine in Lycia when I visit in your country. Come, let us keep clear of each other's spears, even here in the thick of battle. Look, plenty of Trojans for me to kill. Your famous allies too, any soldier the god will bring in range, or I could run to ground. And plenty of Argives too, kill them if you can. But let's trade armor. The men must know our claim. We are sworn friends from our father's days till now. Both agreed. Both fighters sprang from their chariots, clasped each other's hands, and traded pacts of friendship. But the son of Cronus, Zeus, stole Glaucus' wits away. He traded his gold armor for bronze with Diomedes, the worth of 100 oxen just for 9. So, let's talk about that bit, because it's one of those times where Homer, the poet, inserts a little bit of kind of editorial snark. A little bit of snark. He says, he says, Zeus stole Glaucus' wits away. He traded gold for bronze. It's not often this is deliberate editorializing here. And again, now, the idea of trading the armor, as we noted, is important. Part of reaffirming these ties, it lets other people know that, like, hey, we're cool because neither of us are dead and we're wearing each other's armor. Clearly, we're good. We're good for now. But the editorial notes, this exchange is uneven. Glaucus gave up gold armor, which is worth so much more, for bronze. It's 100 oxen versus 9. It's like, what in the fuck? And again, it is so inequitable. Homer adds that editorial commentary saying that Zeus must have stolen his wits away. Now, why does this happen? That's a good question. I'm still in the process of reading an article on it. There's one article I read that basically argues this entire exchange, which again is very anomalous in the story. It's really the only time we're going to get this. Essentially says that, like, Glaucus and Diomedes are, in this moment, better than all the rest of the heroes because they see beyond their own personal glory, because realizing that all the stuff, the gold and everything else, it's nothing really, that people matter more, because that's the argument they make. Now, I would argue, again, this is more about the ending of the moment of Aristeia. Well, yeah, as armor it might suck, but worth-wise, it's worth a lot more than bronze. So, I would say again, this is about the ending of Diomedes' moment of Aristeia. And I also think it's important how quickly he does it. And that he doesn't take convincing. It doesn't take a father coming to beg him for his son's body. He's like, oh my God, our grandfathers know each other. Oh my God. Like, Diomedes is a better hero than Achilles. I'm just saying. Is it inequitable? Maybe because in this moment, Glaucus, who's seen the effect of, in his own bloodline, of what happens when you decide to fuck around and find out, number one. Number two, when you try to have actions without consequences, and he's just like, we trade it. I think it also shows how wealthy, clearly, Glaucus is coming from. Glaucus, wherever his kingdom is in Lycia, it must be fairly wealthy if he's just got ornamental gold armor on. And he's still kicking ass. Seems he's a pretty good warrior. So, we're seeing a wealth disparity. Now remember, it is said that the Greeks have been getting pretty rich from constantly ransoming high-ranking Trojans back. So obviously, Troy's very wealthy. Hector's going to bemoan the state of the treasury, but it tells you just how, again, rich Troy and its allies are. They're very wealthy. For me, this is less about, like, oh, the honor doesn't matter or whatever have you. I'm like, no, bullshit. Honor matters to everybody in this story, I guess, except for Paris. This is about the ending of the moment of Aristeia. This is the true moment of Diomedes coming down to his humanity. And I think that, he gives armor to Glaucus. These armor pieces they're trading have history to them. Like, almost all of Diomedes' armor, kit and caboodle, is mostly coming from his father. So that's a pretty big deal. what it lacks in the value of gold, I think it holds in sentimental value. It holds in importance. It's a storied piece of armor. So even though Homer says, like, oh, this, all of these, it took his wits, he traded bronze for gold, I'm like, but he's getting a storied piece of armor, which is really important, again, to these Greek heroes. Your legacy, your kleos, the stories about you. Like, you can tell this story. Like, what is that? That bronze armor? That's the armor of Diomedes, which is the armor of his father. Like, that's a big deal. We've had so many moments like that. So it is kind of funny to get this editorializing from Homer saying, oh, but Zeus stole Glaucus' wit. He gave up gold for bronze. And I'll be like, but it's not about the worth in money, because that's not important. Kleos is. It's not so much that people matter more, which is what this article, this paper I'm currently still reading is trying to argue, which I'm like, actually, I think it's more that Kleos kind of matters more. It actually kind of reinforces the value of Kleos, even while this seems like an anomalous moment, and it's only anomalous because it is Diomedes coming down off the Aristeia, returning to the community. Which I think, it's this very fascinating anomaly. But yes, Xenia rears its ugly head. Is it ugly? It rears its moral, ethical head. Yes, and the story of how you got it from the other person. I mean, is Glaucus going to survive this? I don't actually know if he does. I mean, he is on the side of Troy. I can't actually remember. But yeah, no, I'm like, honestly, while it seems very anomalous, it makes sense in the context of the Aristeia, and I think in the context of Kleos, it makes sense when you consider what's the value of Diomedes' armor, and you're like, well, it's his dad's, and his dad's pretty fucking famous, and one of the Epigonoi, and that's kind of cool, like, Okay. And now, when Hector reached the Scaean gates and the great oak, the wives and daughters of Troy came rushing up around him, asking about their sons, brothers, friends, and husbands. But Hector told them only, pray to the gods. All the Trojan women, one after another, hard sorrows were hanging over many. I briefly want to mention this oak tree. You reach the Scaean gates and the great oak. Now, this clearly was some kind of conspicuous landmark on the plain outside the Scaean gates. The oak, mind you, is sacred to Zeus. Its associations with Zeus come from Pausanias, as well as links to a sacred grove at Dodona. It is said that the priests and priestesses at the grove at Dodona, which had the oak trees, would interpret the rustling of the leaves. Yep. Now, Zeus at Dodona is worshipped as Zeus Naios, which is the god of the spring below the oak in the Temenos, and also as Zeus Bauleos, which is like the counselor. So this ties, if you think, to Jason's ship, the Argo. It was known to, like, it could speak. Am I understanding what right? From a financial viewpoint, sure, yeah, in terms of basic monetary value, Diomedes Glaucus is losing out, basically. It's not so much that he's stealing, but they're trading armor pieces. Glaucus is just worth more. 100 cows versus 9. Yeah, that's a big financial difference. I would say in terms of the importance of the piece of armor and like the history and the legacy of the piece, and saying like, well, this was the armor of Diomedes, who just had this moment of Aristeia on the plains of Troy, who's the son of Tydeus. This was Tydeus' armor. Like, you're pretty equal. Like, no, there's value to that. But monetary-wise, it is such a stark difference that Homer has to comment on it. But yeah, so... Oh, excuse me, hi. Remember that the ship, the Argo... Poor Glaucus. That's what you... If they're always fighting over that guy's armor, it's going to get you in the end. Jason's ship, the Argo, said the mast, like the front piece of it, very famously, could speak. It had this kind of gift of almost like prophecy and truth-telling, and that's because that was an oak timber that was from the oak tree at Dodona. And that comes to us from the Argonautica, where that gets explained. Oh, good, I can slightly adjust. Oh, hi, Pink, sorry. Thank you, Moose. So that's why we had to mention this oak tree, even though obviously it's clearly something noticeable on the train. You don't mention it for no reason. And soon Hector came to Priam's palace, That magnificent structure, built wide with porches and colonnades of polished stone, and deep within its walls were 50 sleeping chairs, masoned in smooth, lustrous ashlar, linked in a line where the sons of Priam slept beside their wedded wives, and facing these, opening out across the inner courtyard, lay the 12 sleeping chambers of Priam's daughters, masoned and roofed in lustrous ashlar. Seems West argues it's a different word, pugron, tower, and not phagon, oak. So my version has when Hector came at the tower. Interesting. Oh. Pugron and not phagron. Oh, that's interesting. Hold on. Oh, do we have... Interesting. Hold on. We must... I don't know what line that is exactly in the Greek. Who knows what line that is in Greek? I'm in the 300s here. Thus had spoken, my child is the short teeth. Okay, hold on. Here we go. He's not the only one who goes for oak. 235-ish. I'm looking for a P. Maybe it's a little past that. I think I found it. Phaon. I don't know. I see the phi. I see phi. Phi. I guess it's phi. It makes sense because the woman would stay inside the walls, not outside. I thought he was just passing, he was still outside the walls. He hadn't gone back in yet. Like, we hadn't described him coming back in yet. So if he passes an oak tree, or maybe he had, maybe the oak tree is inside. You pass this oak tree to get into the gates. Purgon. The Greek word I'm looking at sure doesn't look like purgon, if that's the right one that I'm looking at, and I think it is. Yeah, no, it's definitely here. Mariana, let's see if it lets me put Greek letters in here without freaking out. That's the word that I found when I look up the Greek. Fig. Thanks for the translation, the auto translation, which says Valonia oak. It says came to the Scaean gate and the oak tree. I'm like, you can come to the oak tree, depending on what order, I think you can come through the oak tree to the gate and come inside. In defense, I will say of it being an oak tree, I figured, okay, this oak tree is clearly near the gate somewhere, but you come inside. He's just entered the gate. And so the women come and crowd around him, like they're waiting at the gates for their husbands. But that's the Greek word when I went and looked up the Greek. I think the oak tree just makes sense, and we also consider Zeus loves this city. I don't know. This feels like I'm about to get very out of my depth, but that's quite interesting. Mariana, I sense this is a rabbit hole we will have to dig into later. I already sense it. Where the hell was I? Ah, yes, here we go. We're wandering around the palace of Priam. Here we go. Linked in a line where the sons-in-law of Priam slept beside their wives. There at the palace, Hector's mother met her son, that warm, good-hearted woman, going in with Laodike, the loveliest daughter Hecuba ever bred. His mother, some of the women get near him as the whatever word. Oh, no, wait, I'm still looking at the wrong thing. Whatever. Anyway. His mother clutched his hand and urged him, called his name. My child, why have you left the bitter fighting? Why have you come back? Look how they wear you out, the sons of Achaea. Curse them, battling round our walls. And that's why your spirit brought you back to Troy, to climb the heights and stretch your arms to Zeus. But wait, I'll bring you some honeyed mellow wine. First pour out cups to Father Zeus and the other gods, then refresh yourself, if you'd like to quench your thirst. When a man's exhausted, wine will build his strength, not weary as you are, fighting for your people. This is our eldest son. She's very proud of her. I mean, as she should be. He's a great son. It's a shame about the youngest. But Hector shook his head, his helmet flashing. Don't offer me mellow wine, mother, not now. You'd sap my limbs. I'd lose my nerve for war. And I'd be ashamed to pour a glistening cup to Zeus with unwashed hands. I'm spattered with blood and filth. How could I pray to the Lord of storm and lightning? No, mother, you are the one to pray. Go to Athena's shrine, the queen of plunder. Go, with offerings, gather the older noble women, and take a robe, the largest, loveliest robe that you can find throughout the royal halls. A gift that far and away you prize most yourself, and spread it out across the sleek-haired goddess's knees. Okay. So really cool Greek word here, since we were just nerding out about Greek words. We're going even further. That bit of go to Athena's shrine, the queen of plunder. There's some cool nerdiness here, which I'm sure Mariana already knows. Is our resident Greek expert here. But the Greek word being used here is agalei, which means essentially like driver of plunder. Yeah, and Venetu so much of other material. There's the other ones. Difficult task is the translator work. Ah, interesting. Well, it's not just that it's thrown away. They usually do, like, it becomes part of a feast. We see that especially in the Odyssey, how these ritual sacrifices lead then to feasts which feed kind of everybody else while you're at it. But the Greek word being used here, for queen of plunder here, the agalei, which means driver of plunder, sometimes can mean forager. And this is an epithet of Athena that likely comes from the words ago, which means to drive, and leia, which obviously means plunder, booty, loot, stuff. Now, obviously, generally, we know in ancient warfare, if you were practicing, with the Greek mythology, warrior leaders would pray to Athena for victory, which included, of course, the acquisition and taking of spoils of war. You pray to win, and when you win, you take shit. Hence, queen of plunder. So again, think of the phrase, to the victor go the spoils. It's kind of that idea. Thus, this agalei epithet is kind of a nod to her role in granting victory and therefore in granting spoils. Now, I did read that on the flip side, it could also, because we think of driving, it could designate Athena as the leader or protectress of the people as a herder protects his cattle. I'm sure there's more philology there that I'm just sort of missing. I assume it has to do with something involving the word to drive. The big thing is that you call her the queen of plunder because you pray to her for victory, and a part of victory is plunder. I'm like, oh shit, that makes sense. So there you go, queen of plunder. I think that's kind of a cool epithet, not gonna lie. It's a queen of the stuff. Then promise to sacrifice 12 heifers in her shrine, yearlings never broken. If only she'll pity Troy. She won't. The Trojan wives, and all our helpless children. If only she'll hold Diomedes back from the holy city. That wild spearman, that invincible, headlong terror. Now, mother, go to the queen of plunder's shrine, and I'll go hunt for Paris. Summon him to fight. The man will hear what I have to say. Let the earth gape and swallow him on the spot. Great curse Olympian Zeus let live and grow in him for Troy and high-hided Priam and all his sons. That man, if I could see him bound for the house of death, I could say my heart had forgot its retching grief. But his mother simply turned away to the palace. She gave her servants orders, and out they strode to gather the older noble women through the city. Hecuba went down to a storeroom filled with scent, and there they were, brocaded, beautiful robes, the work of Sidonian women. Magnificent Paris brought those women back himself from Sidon, sailing the open seas on the same long voyage he swept Helen off, her famous father's child. So, that little bit where we mentioned Sidon and the Sidonian women, this allusion to Sidon indicates that Homer was familiar with this idea that Paris actually brought Helen to Troy in a kind of roundabout way, kind of meandering a bit. Now, later you will get Herodotus, who tells a story that apparently he heard from some Egyptian priests, gotta love Herodotus, that Helen and Paris actually kind of detoured at Egypt on their way to Troy due to bad winds. We, of course, know later Helen will have her second honeymoon in Egypt with Menelaus. It's also interesting that we talk about Helen immediately after we're talking about robes. Helen is essentially being put on the same level as these robes. She is objectified here. Being like, this is how Helen was treated. She, in the mind of this moment, is on the same level as these robes. She's cargo, just like these robes and these other women, which essentially makes sense given that Paris objectifies her for the whole of the Iliad. She would just be seen as part of the stuff he brought back. Poor fucking Helen, I know. Absolutely insane. Lifting one from the lot, Hecuba brought it out for great Athena's gift, the largest, loveliest, richly worked, and like a star it glistened, deep beneath the others. Then she made her way with a file of noble women rushing in her train. Once they reached Athena's shrine on the city crest, the beauty Theano opened the doors to let them in. Cisseus' daughter, the horseman Antenor's wife, and Athena's priestess chosen by the Trojans. Then, with a shrill wail, they all stretched their arms to Athena, as Theano, her face radiant, lifting the robe on high, spread it out across the sleek-haired goddess's knees, and prayed to the daughter of mighty father Zeus. Queen Athena, shield of our city, glory of goddesses, now shatter the spear of Diomedes, that wild man, hurl him headlong down before the Scaean gates. At once we'll sacrifice 20 heifers in your shrine, yearlings never broken, if only you'll pity Troy, the Trojan wives, and all our helpless children. But Athena refused to hear Theano's prayers. And while they prayed to the daughter of mighty Zeus, Hector approached the halls of Paris. Sumptuous halls he built himself from the finest masons of the day, master builders famed in the fertile land of Troy. They'd raised his sleeping chamber, house, and court adjoining Priam's and Hector's aloft the city heights. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's from the same ago, but the epithet contraction, the herd is achele, very such. No, that's fine. Totally fine, Mariana. I was like, I wasn't sure. It got mentioned in the note when I was like looking at the word, but I figured there was something philological I was missing. Okay. It's important we noted here. It seems that, again, unlike the 48 other children of Priam, Hector and Paris have their own residences outside the main royal palace. Remember, we talked about all these rooms for all of these sons and daughters and their spouses. But Hector and Priam have their own homes. And the three areas that are mentioned, we talk about the sleeping chamber, the house, and the court. These are, essentially, they represent the complete Homeric house. Which is, the interior and the sleeping room. That's where you'd have, the women's apartment, if you will. The general reception hall, kind of the house, if you will. And then the courtyard, sort of outer area. And as I say, it is very important that this is, as we say, a house that Paris built himself. This is the house that Paris built. And it is not, we're not mentioning that Paris built this himself for no reason. It immediately emphasizes this distancing between Helen and Paris that was already established in Book 3. Book 3 already made it clear she's not home, she doesn't want to be here, she's distant from Paris, she can't stand him, there's no love lost here. We're re-emphasizing that again by saying this is the house that Paris built, essentially. We're highlighting that Helen is not in her own home, she's in Paris's home. She has, and we are showing already, just in that one little comment, that Helen has little to no say even in where she lives. She can't stay in the main palace away from him. She's going to be in the house that Paris built, which is its own residence. And what we're going to see eventually, because she's going, she has to follow him to these places. We're going to see her sitting with all the women of the house silently, so that we are reminded of her silently following Iris to watch the duel, silently following Aphrodite to Paris's bedchamber, and silently following Paris then to bed in book 3. Again, the silence is not a happy silence. This is a silence that emphasizes she's being forced and that she's not happy with what she has to be doing. So it's already important that we're being told this is the house that Paris built. It is Paris's house. I know. Look, Helen only appears in like 3 scenes. I dived into the Helen scenes because I think she's so fascinating, and what Homer does with her in the Iliad is so heartbreaking, and yet she's so strong at the same time. So I did a lot of look into the moments with Helen, which meant I looked into the moments with Paris. There, stop it. Thank you. There we go. Now, Hector, dear to Zeus, strode through the gates, clutching a thrusting lance, 11 forearms long. Damn. The bronze tip of the weapon shone before him, ringed with a golden hoop to grip the shaft. And there in the bedroom, Hector came on Paris. We're in the bedroom. We're not even like the main hall, but of course we're in the bedroom. We just, had Paris essentially essay Helen by coercion. Thank you, Aphrodite. Came on Paris, polishing, fondling his splendid battle gear, his shield and breastplate, turning over and over his long, curved bow. How nice of you. Why the fuck aren't you out there fighting? And there was Helen of Argos, sitting with all the women of the house, directing the rich embroidered work they had in hand. Seeing Paris, Hector raked his brother with insults, stinging taunts. What on earth are you doing? How wrong it is. This anger you keep smoldering in your heart. Look, your people dying around the city, the steep walls, dying in arms, and all for you. The battle cries and the fighting flaring up around the citadel. My book has the note, the Mycenaean spears didn't go past 3 meters, so this is an exaggeration. He's got a long spear. Homer, are you saying something? We do like an exaggeration, but Homer, are we saying something? Just saying. Okay. This is an interesting hour. He says, where he talks about how wrong it is, this anger you keep smoldering in your heart. Now, we can say that going back to ancient times, scholars and commentators have wondered, why the fuck is Paris angry? Why should Paris be angry? This makes no sense. Option 1, the 2 main schools of thought. The anger is actually that of the Trojans against Paris. Paris is going to reply in a couple lines, and it's clear enough that, he knows the Trojans are not fond of him because he's the reason this all started. Helen feels that as well, but she actually feels shame over it instead of anger. I mean, she's probably angry, but mostly she expresses shame. Option 2, Hector thinks Paris is sulking because he senses the resentment of his fellow Trojans and is therefore angry that they are angry at him, which I think goes in line. The reason I think that is, again, we talk about Greece as a shame culture. They used your ability to feel shame as whether or not you were a good person. Thus far, Paris has been pretty fucking shameless. It's why kainopis, dog-eyed, dog-faced, which means being shameless, is so insulting a word. And why often, at least through Fagles, we have him translating it as Helen calling herself essentially a slut, a whore, a bitch. Like, she uses these horrid, slanderous, nasty words. It's like, it's emphasizing how nasty a word that is, right? I think this is that Paris doesn't feel shame for what he's done. He's going with the kind of nihilistic, oh, well, the gods put everything in motion, not my fault. I feel no shame. Helen feels shame. Even though it's totally illogical for her to feel shame, the obsession one wish will owe Helen. Yeah, exactly, come on now. So, but it's important to note that people have been wondering about that particular line, about this anger that apparently Paris feels, and what is this? It's been debated for the millennia, even, not just the centuries. You'd be the first to lash out at another anywhere if you saw him hanging back from this this hateful war. Up with you, before all Troy is torched to a cinder here and now. Also, there's the paradoxical parallel with Achilles' anger keeping him from the fight. Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely a paradoxical parallel. Absolutely. Again, this is why I say the Iliad does a pretty good job of like, you don't feel that bad for Achilles. Like, you kind of don't like Achilles for a lot of the narrative. And I think that's very much on purpose. And this bit where he's like, you'd be the first one to shit on somebody if they were hiding behind the walls. Like, what the fuck are you doing here? Right? Now, obviously, the underlying thought that Hector has not expressed here is like, all this shit happens, all of the people are dying outside. He's like, you would yell at them. He goes, and yet, you sit here in your bedchamber, polishing your shit, careless and indifferent. Indifferent is the big word. Once again, as we say, Hector has to berate Paris into any form of action or what would be seen as proper behavior for a warrior or hero, or even more adequately, as the source of the great heiress, the great turmoil, the great discord that is the current war. This is, I mean, we're literally going through book 3 all over again, where Hector was like, I fucking know you did not flinch when this is all your fault. Bitch, what are you doing? Get your ass out there. Like, he's having to do it again. Paris does nothing of his own volition. He has to be pushed. He has to be forced. And that's why he then falls into this, like, well, it's not my fault, I got forced. It's like, because you don't fucking, it's literally, it's weaponized incompetence. Or weaponized indifference, really, more than anything else. And the indifference, I mean, a part of Hector's rage, why he's so pissed off and angry at Paris, I mean, for many reasons, but why this really upsets him, and what Paris is doing is really abhorrent to all of the heroes, and this includes Hector, who, again, Hector is a great standard, is a great hero. Like, again, the Iliad does not look down on Hector. It's like, no, Hector's, again, we're all cool with Hector. It's unfortunately on the side of the Trojans, and even Glaucus and all these other people on the side of the Trojans, they're great warriors. We talk about them. They're fine. Except for Paris, because he's the source of all this. And it's because of this indifference. He has this indifference to the weight of the consequences that his actions have caused upon the Greeks, upon Menelaus, upon Hector, upon all those Trojans who, as Hector says, are dying out there on the plain, and all of the other people of Troy, upon Helen. And this indifference is a core feature of his character in the Iliad, of his Iliadic presentation. He is, ultimately, he's a coward. And especially after the judgment the judgment which was the whole thing with the golden apple and being reinstated as Prince of Troy, he seems to operate, I called it on this principle of like sleepwalking through life, of dancing through life, if you will, take the wicked term. I chose the sleepwalking through life because I think of the phrase that Europe was sleepwalking into World War I. Like, they just sort of do these things, and it's like, you want to stop this train anytime soon, guys? And again, since I call Troy the kind of Greek mythological World War I, hence I say sleepwalkers. He kind of sleepwalks his way through life. He exhibits no autonomy, none. He's doing only as others tell him, or when he feels like he has to do something, like, oh, I guess I should do that. I.e., he acts like he has zero choice in any of his actions or behaviors, which is so, and again, this is all after the judgment and after he's reinstated as prince, because we know before then, when he was just a shepherd, he was growing up as this, just out on Mount Ida and doing all these things. It seems like he had autonomy, like he did things. Again, there's the promise of Alexandros and like who Alexandros might be, but it all gets wrecked. He just sort of stops caring. He just decides, oh, well then what's the fucking point? I don't need to do shit now, so I won't. And again, this is where I say, this is where Paris is like sort of fascinating in that dichotomy where you see the before he reinstates his princehood and the after. I mean, his cow got taken. He made the choice to go and follow to fight in those games, which were ironically celebratory funeral games for him. Not that he knew that, but it's like the moment he becomes Prince of Troy, he's indifferent to everything. Like the shift is pretty insane. And this is why Hector's berating him, because Paris, at this point, we're seeing him as lazy. He's uninterested in the pain of others. I mean, even Helen rips into him, clearly showing how distraught and upset she is, and he's just like, God, I'm so hot for you, in book 3, and it feels gross. You're just like, what the fuck, my man? And even worse, is the fact that he has no desire to deal with the consequences of his actions, because he just assumes, well, the gods are just going to step in and interfere for their favorites. Why should I do anything? Makes it wonder if he got a whiff of what his return would mean. Whether or not he did, it's then just like, buddy, you didn't have to go to the mainland and take her. You didn't have to do all of these things. And this is where we're getting at the argument of free will, will of Zeus, and fate all existing uncomfortably. Like, whether or not he got a whiff of it, I think it's just messed up. I still have very little. Again, I find him fascinating in that you see the potential and then he just willingly throws it all down the drain. From the moment he gets power and privilege, he throws it down the drain. I'm just like, okay, cool, great, awesome. So what we see with him is I don't know if we can call it, I mean, I guess you could kind of call it hubris in a way. There's something hubristic about just assuming everything will work out for you in that way. Or assuming that, like, you don't have to try or do things. And there is, remember, we talked about hubris as having an inherent violence to it. And I do think that this kind of weaponized indifference and weaponized incompetence does have a violence to it. An undercurrent of violence to it. And it's with Paris, it is, and especially in his Iliadic presentation, it's kind of on an unprecedented level. Like, you just stare and blink at this man. You just go, the fucking audacity. I've never, you turn into Cicero giving the In Catilinam going, the fucking audacity. What shameless audacity. And it's like, yeah, you do kind of wonder there, which, I mean, ultimately is probably why, Paris has to fall. The shameless hubris is going to get him too. It's just a different kind of hubris. He would take a trust fund, throw it all into game microtransactions. Nah, he'd get into, he'd make a, what are those called? Like Bitcoin kind of things, like a cryptocurrency. He'd get into cryptocurrency. He'd become a crypto bro. Am I wrong? He would run a crypto scam. It is a possibility, but almost all the heroes don't. You don't give up trying. Most of them, we go, it's kind of honorable that you try and fight it. It is quite an existential nihilism. It's just to a degree where you're like, it's the fact that you don't care who's getting hurt that irks me. And again, he is one of the few, or first, I should say one of the earliest, it seems, written examples we have of somebody who does seem to, he basically verbalizes, says, I'm a pawn. I'm a pawn of the gods. I'm a puppet that they just use. But you could still care about all the people who are being hurt in the meanwhile. And so, again, this nihilism and indifference, it just comes across as so selfish and disrespectful. And just ultimately a kind of passive violence towards others. I was just like, no, I have no respect for that. God, at least don't be a dick. And again, I don't want to talk more about book 3. It just makes me angry. It just makes me angry. Where was I? Hateful war. Up with you, before all Troy is torched to a cinder here and now. And Paris, magnificent as a god, replied, Hector, you criticize me fairly, yes. Nothing unfair beyond what I deserve. And so, I will try to tell you something. Please, bear with me. Hear me out. It's not so much from anger or outrage at our people. I just don't care about our people. That I kept my rooms so long. I only wanted to plunge myself in grief. Just now, my wife was bringing me round, her winning words urging me back to battle. And it strikes me, even me, as the better way. Victory shifts, Now one man, one great man, another. So come, wait while I get this war gear on, or you go on ahead and I will follow. I think I can overtake you. I twitch. Okay, I want to talk about this bit. This just now my wife was bringing me round, her winning words urging me back to battle. If you can recall book 3, He's claiming he stayed in his room out of great sorrow, as opposed to the clearly just presented indifference. I mean, he's polishing his shit. He's making it glossy. It's like, you could just put it on and go, dude. You weren't using it before. It's clearly in fine condition. And then, as he says, even just now, Helen was using soft words to persuade him back to battle. And we know this is either A, some kind of sarcasm, B, an outright lie, or C, I don't know, Paris's own delusion. Because nothing in the text supports this version of events. Nothing. We saw book 3. She was not using soft and winning words to urge him back to battle. She was emasculating him and tearing him a new asshole. Like, Paris, buddy, you're either being sarcastic, you're just lying, or you are Delulu, my friend. Like, buddy. Buddy. What in the hell? It wasn't his armored spirit. No, that's why I said he wasn't using his shit. It's fine. That's why I said it should be in good condition. You weren't using it. What do you mean it wasn't his armored spirit? I mean, like, we know he had to borrow it. Doesn't it say that he's shining his stuff? Yeah, it says Paris polishing, fondling his splendid battle gear, his shield and breastplate, turning over and over his own quiver. I was under the impression it meant that, like, his stuff that, he didn't bring onto the battlefield in book 3. I mean, Mariana, you can correct me if the Greek intimates that this is actually the borrowed stuff. I was under the impression this is his stuff that he forgot to bring and therefore wasn't using because, he rolled up in leopard pelts and was voguing. Yeah, I know he wears his brother's armor, but I didn't think that's what he's polishing here. I thought he was polishing his stuff that he didn't wear. So I'm like, it's in fine condition. You weren't wearing it. Like, you had it. You deliberately left it behind. What are you doing? It should be fine. Put it back on and go. I mean, if you really want to take your brother's armor off, which, I mean, obviously he did, because he, and if, that bit in book 3, I'd be like, I assumed this was his, and it's just sort of like, so just put it on and go. If you actually gave a shit, you just put it on and go. But he doesn't give a shit. The Trojans gave Helen back and Paris gave up, would they still sack Troy? They can't give Helen back. And Paris can't. Like, they really can't. By mint condition, sure, we were saying the same. Okay, yes. But, so we were saying the same thing. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, we were saying the same thing, exactly. I'm like, it's in mint condition. It's fine. Why are we making it even glossier? Like, just go. The problem is the Trojans can't give it back. Because this was a gift from Aphrodite. Helen, again, has become a transactional piece on the board. It's because of a god. You don't want to risk the divine wrath that would come. So unfortunately, that's just not an option on the table for the Trojans. It's why they have to say no, even though they hate they're being dragged into this war. They hate that this is happening. They're pissed about it. Hector, helmet flashing, answered nothing. Yeah, I can imagine he's sitting there going, breathe, Hector, you can't kill your brother. I mean, you could, but you'd get in trouble. And Helen spoke to him now, her soft voice welling up. My dear brother, dear to me, bitch that I am, vicious, scheming, horror to freeze my heart, the heart. Which, again, we're seeing her kind of renew that same sort of initially self-deprecating, all of these things. I mean, she could very well, obviously clearly feels this about herself, but also it's very smart to talk this way to people upon whom your safety depends. Draw this prime. And I have a whole lot of notes on this speech she's about to give to Hector. If they gave Paris up to die. Nope. You'd be in trouble with Aphrodite. He's a favorite of Aphrodite, the whole reason she gave him the gift. Nope. Because then what do you do about Helen? The whole thing is, it's about Helen almost more than Paris, right? Otherwise it wouldn't be Vogue enough. It's true, it's gotta be extra glossy. It's like, I want to blind them. It needs to go with my leopard pelt. I'm still never over the image of him voguing. Oh, how I wish that first day my mother brought me into the light, some black whirlwind had rushed me out to the mountains or into the surf where the roaring breakers crash and drag, and the waves had swept me off before all this had happened. But since the gods ordained it all these desperate years, I wish I had been the wife of a better man, someone alive to outrage the withering scorn of men. This one has no steadiness in his spirit. Not now. He never will. And he's going to reap the fruits of it, I swear. But come in. Rest on this seat beside me, dear brother. You are the one hit hardest by the fighting, Hector. You more than all. And all for me. Slut that I am. And this blind, mad Paris. The two of us. Zeus planted a killing doom within us both, so even for generations still unborn, we will live in song. Wait. Okay. I'm going to talk a lot about this. Oh, yeah, no, I wish I'd been the wife, but around. I have like a page worth of notes on this speech. Because again, I looked a lot at Helen because I think she's a fascinating character here. There's a lot going on. So now, Hector doesn't even get to reply to whatever it was Paris said, because in the wake of his words, where he says, just now my wife was saying, oh, you should go and fight, she's using these soft, honeyed, sweet words, where Helen's like, bitch, I know you did not say that about me. Helen immediately seizes this opportunity to replace Paris's words, essentially debunk, as we would say, this rather mendacious depiction of her. She gives her own self-presentation, and very much, again, as I said, like her speech actually to Paris in book 3. This is of her own volition. Nobody speaks to her first. She takes the step. She takes the impetus to do something herself. Again, already showing that Paris is more this sort of misty feminine mystique than she is. She's like, oh yeah, no, fuck no, I'm stepping in. Now, she completely ignores Paris's account. She's like, okay, what the fuck? And essentially refusing to be defined by what are essentially, in her mind, kind of rather slanderous words about her. She's determined to make her own statement about who she is. And I think it's also significant that she initiates a speech like this with Hector, who, of all the Trojan men with whom we've seen her interact in the Iliad, Priam is rather kind, as we could say, to her. But he is the king, and really upon him her safety depends. So she's careful with her words to him. She's careful with her words to essentially everyone but Paris. Paris, she just rips a new asshole. It's that of all the Trojan men she's interacted with in the Iliad thus far, Hector is the most heroic. He is closest to what the Greek warriors, these Greek kings would be like, oh yeah, no, like calls to like, we see you. No. Real recognizes real. In the way, he most readily matches the mold of kind of the Greek hero and the warrior as her husband Menelaus does. So and later in the Iliad, she doesn't say it here, but she will later say it at Hector's funeral, he was one of only 2 Trojans who were nice to me. Priam and Hector, really the only 2 Trojans who are actually genuinely nice and kind to her. And she recognizes that. Which again, I think says a lot about Hector's character. So the first part of her address, this whole like, oh, bitch that I am, that all that self-deprecating stuff. It's a more kind of intense, almost agitated version of the same stuff she expressed to Priam in book 3. Remember, she was saying the same thing. She opened the same kind of way. And she's also telling Hector kind of almost desperately, because I think it really does matter to her, Hector's opinion of her. Because again, he's one of the only people who's really nice to her, and she really does clearly like and respect Hector. She's almost desperately trying to tell him that she is not the loving and caring sort of domestic figure that Paris just painted of her now. She's a wife that's, who is consumed by guilt and self-loathing. And she's like, I'm equally loathed and reviled by everyone around me. So she's very desperate to probably not lose one of the few people who are genuinely decent to her while she's a prisoner behind enemy lines. Now, then we move from that first part to her venting her antipathy for Paris. We go even further than book 3. This is like, again, book 3, the sequel. And there's no ambiguity in her words here. She condemns Paris's lack of concern for his peers or their opinions, as well as his lack of steadfastness, which are absolutely deficiencies in Paris's manhood. Again, we've moved from just emasculating him on kind of physical grounds. The way she was like, yeah, my husband Menelaus is a better warrior than you, and he's hotter than you. Like, we emasculated him on a physical level in book 3. Now we're doing so in the realm of like the mind and of morals and mores and ethics. And this is a further assertion, really, of Helen's self-identity. She is not, nor could she be, a woman who could be happy with someone like Paris. She's too discerning. She possesses too fine a moral sense. After all, unlike Paris, she is the one who can and does feel shame for what has happened. Even if we sit there and go, oh my God, girl, you literally were like, your mind was hijacked. Your body was hijacked. But she actually feels shame. Paris doesn't. This is a clear differential between them. And what's even more important in the conveying of Helen speaking this unhappiness of hers is the timing that's happening here, this critique that she levels at Paris. Like, she's saying he's a man of no moral conduct. She has just been forced to have sex with Paris. And she's immediately essentially addressing this with Hector. She's like, no fucking way. She's like, what the fuck? And such a disclosure in the way that she does it, it's such a violation, would be seen as a massive violation of the spousal relationship assumption of privacy. I say it's the false spousal relationship assumption of privacy, because this is really a false marriage, right? When you talk about like literary context, it's like the god and the false god, like the good mom and the bad mom, or all that. Like, this is the false marriage. And that's why none of it lines up. In the same way we talked in the Odyssey Book Club, when they touchy the cows they're not supposed to touch, and they do essentially what is a false sacrifice. They try to do all the motions, but they don't have the right stuff. It's not being done the right way because it's a false sacrifice, because they know what they're doing is wrong. It's never going to work. So everything about it is wrong in a literary sense. And in the same way here, it's like, this is a false marriage. Everything about it is wrong in a literary sense, especially as we're being presented Helen in her character and given all the situations. Now this diatribe she gives at Paris also conveys her sense of helplessness, of entrapment, by introducing, again, her protestation of this absolute aversion to Paris, with a note also saying how, like, in a way, the gods have sort of made this happen, that they've decreed these kind of evils currently besetting both her and others. Because in the way that she says it, it's kind of littered with a lot of anger and kind of resignation at the gods' manipulation. It's, again, a deep sense of powerlessness, as opposed to any kind of excuse. Unlike Paris, who's in the absolute nihilism of, well, it's the gods' things, I'm not at fault. She goes, I still feel responsible, I still feel real shame, and I'm still angry also, too, that the gods have done this. Do you know how much about Hellenic traditions, about weddings themselves? Was it like a where you basically just move the wife? Yeah, it does seem it's mostly like that. You just move the wife into the husband's home. Yeah. It's transactional. It's exchange. It's moving of it's transition of ownership, basically, more than anything else. Yeah, I do believe it's something like that. Similar tradition. Helen believes the people of Troy hate her for the fact the war is because Paris is taking over her, but it's just her own complete perspective. It isn't actually as true as she thinks. It does seem there's an element of the Trojans are not super fond of her. Yeah, they blame Paris, but they also see her as a woman of low morals. Because again, hey, none of that. Thank you. I mean, again, she's aware of the narrative about her. She makes a point of saying, we're going to hear later. Okay, so spoilers really, this is for the funeral of Hector, because Helen gives a lament at the funeral of Hector, and she makes a point of saying, like, no, these women, like, they won't talk to me. Others, they sort of flinch and sneer at me. So no, she's not entirely projecting her own, self-loathing. There's a genuine, reasonable kind of, like, they look down on her and they don't like her that much. A lot of them don't. She feels it, and she's not totally wrong in feeling it. It's genuinely a feeling. It's part of why then Aphrodite's threat in book 3 of being like, I'll make the Greeks hate you, kind of, and the Trojans just absolutely, really, truly, violently loathe you. It's why that's so scary. A potential for her, because she already is feeling kind of their disgust with her and the way they look down on her and are being like, is it the moving wife into the husband, still applicable when it's Menelaus who moved to Sparta? Yeah, absolutely. Because they were, well, essentially they gave him a house. He moved into there, and also he took over for Tyndareus. Tyndareus passed it on to him because they were in exile. So he had his own residence in Sparta. You move her there, right? Tyndareus and Leda still stay in their own home. They just have a palace also that is Menelaus's. And that's where Helen moves into. So yeah, Helen, rather like Paris, does acknowledge the manipulation of the gods, but she doesn't use it as an excuse the way that Paris does. And again, this is showing the differences in their characters. The Greeks would recognize, oh, she's of higher character than Paris. And so yeah, as I said, even though Helen is not pleading any sort of abnegation of responsibility, she absolutely still feels she's in some way responsible for this. 'Cause she's like, my body still did the motions. Like I still left, even though again, we recognize in a more modern sense, the nuances there. And like I said, that is one of many things that sort of differentiates her from Paris. What's also important is that she never actually directly addresses Paris as her husband. She says, and while it is, and this was from an article that I was reading, and so I can't speak to the Greek. Obviously in here we say, she says, I wish I had been the wife of a better man. So she never actually calls him her husband. And wife could be, I'm not entirely sure of the translation there. I'm in an unfortunate situation I don't control, but has an effect on so many people. I care to the point I wish I didn't exist, even meant nothing, opposite of Paris. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. She cares. She genuinely cares. And that's where they're like, and that's the difference, and that's what makes her a better person in the eyes of the Greeks, and I would think most people. Mariana, you'll have to speak to me about this, because in this article they noted that Helen never addresses Paris as her husband. Now here, in Fagel, she says, I wish I'd been the wife of a better man. I don't know if wife is the deliberate word that is used. But regardless, I mean, we still technically aren't referring to Paris as her husband. We're doing a little semantic things here. Semantic things here. And save for, it says, Helen never addresses Paris as her husband, save for one moment referring to him as such very much later in the final book. Again, her next appearance is not going to be until book 24. But even more than that, it's important that she only sits with him when she's forced, never names a single trait or act that she values in Paris, and she just shows no affection or fondness for Paris. Like, it is so clear. Absolute antipathy for Paris. But contrastly, she shows great deference to Hector. She appreciates his efforts and endeavors, rather in the same way the Achaean warriors do. Again, they respect Hector. They recognize him as someone worthy of respect and paying attention. Remember, he comes out and fucking aura farms in book 3, and they're all just like, whoa, nah, Hector wants to speak, we listen. He's worthy of respect. We see in her actions to Hector, we see this capacity for warmth, for discernment, and a more sincere bonding than we've previously seen with Paris or even with Priam. Because I think it points to Helen's really strong, understandable desire for connection and belonging. I mean, she's not in her home. It's why she so desperately wants to go home. It's that sense of connection and belonging, the thing she has not had for almost a decade. Well, for probably over a decade at this point, because it took some while. So for like a decade, she has not had this. She's desperate for it. So she's clinging to the one guy who's nice to her. Genuinely seems to have been nice to her. Now, she's so empathetic, and she's such the inner core is so strong. That's why I say, I'm like, honestly, Homer said Greek queens in unprecedented political situations. Am I right? They're so awesome. It's a coitus. That is a word that's formed by a copulative plus coitus, which is the bedstead or the marriage bed coitus. So it's literally one that shares the bed. Okay, I kind of figured. I was like, honestly, I can go back to that article because there was some stuff in there about like that kind of language, but I don't remember it all that well. It was like a 40-page article, so I'd have to go back to it. Great article, though. Interesting. Anyway, so there we have. That's what she says to Hector. And I think there's also, you can tell that, again, she's so aware of what everyone thinks of her in saying, even for generations still unborn, we will live in song. She's like, I'm going to be known as this horrible woman. There's another term for wife that's used in the Odyssey for Helen in respect to Menelaus, and I think it was a different word. Oh, interesting. She's like, I share his bed, therefore I'm considered his wife, like almost by all technicalities here. But it's not like, but with Menelaus, I am his wife, I am his queen. Interesting. Ooh, Mariana, remind me somewhere. It wasn't bed share, it was parakoites. I think. Interesting. This is a rabbit hole I want to dig down later because I actually find this very fascinating. And I can send it to my friend who I know will also find it interesting. Being aside. Yeah, participation, equality, like working together versus what's happening here where I share his bed, so I'm considered his wife. But again, it's all a false marriage. It's all veneer. Ooh, I like this a lot. Homer, you smart son of a bitch. Hector. Oh wait, I already read that bit. Turning to go, his helmet flashing tall, Hector answered. Don't ask me to sit beside you here, Helen. Love me as you do, you can't persuade me now. No time for rest. My heart races to help our Trojans. They long for me, sorely, whenever I am gone. But rouse this fellow, won't you? So he can hurry himself along as well. So he can overtake me before I leave the city. For I must go home to see my people first, to visit my own dear wife and my baby son. Who knows if I will ever come back to them again, or the deathless gods will strike me down at last at the hands of Argive fighters. A flash of his helmet, and off he strode, and quickly reached his sturdy, well-built house. But white-armed Andromache, Hector could not find her in the halls. She and the boy and a servant, finely gowned, were standing watch on the tower, sobbing, grieving. When Hector saw no sign of his loyal wife inside, he went to the doorway, stopped, and asked the servants, Come, please, tell me the truth now, women. Where's Andromache gone? To my sister's house? To my brother's wives with their long flowing robes? Or Athena's shrine where the noble Trojan women gather to meet the great grim goddess over? Or win the great grim goddess over? A busy, willing servant answered quickly. Hector, seeing you want to know the truth, she hasn't gone to your sister's brother's wives or Athena's shrine where the noble Trojan women gather to win the great grim goddess over. Up to the huge gate tower of Troy she's gone, because she heard our men are so hard pressed, the Achaean fighters coming on in so much force. She sped to the wall in panic like a madwoman. The nurse went with her, carrying your child. Bless you, Peg. At that, Hector spun and rushed from his house, back by the same way down the wide, well-paved streets through the city, until he reached the Scaean gate. The last point he would pass to gain the field of battle. There, his warm, generous wife came running up to meet him. Andromache, the daughter of gallant-hearted Aetion, who had lived below Mount Placos, rich with timber, in Thebe, now below the peaks, and ruled Cilicia's people. His daughter had married Hector, helmed in bronze. She joined him now, and following in her steps, a servant holding the boy against her breast. In the first flush of life, only a baby, Hector's son, the darling of his eyes, and radiant as a star. Hector would always call the boy Scamandrios. Townsmen called him Astyanax, lord of the city, since Hector was the lone defense of Troy. Okay. Andromache and Astyanax enter the chat. Bless you, Peg. You good? You gonna sneeze again? Okay. Briefly. Andromache, wife of Hector, mother to Astyanax, daughter of Aetion, and sister to Podes. Her name comes from a combination of the words ande, which means man, and maki, meaning battle. Thus, her name translates as something like battle of men, or battler of men, really more loosely, something like courage or manly virtue. Okay, Andromache. And then we talk about Astyanax, Scamandrios. Hector, obviously, as we know, names him Scamandrios. He named him after the river, Scamandros, that's there. But the people of Troy, of course, call him Astyanax, which it translates roughly as like city lord. Because Anax, obviously meaning like king, and Astium is, it's a combination of those words. This name is obvious. I mean, honestly, it's more appropriate for Hector. So it says that they name him out of gratitude. So hence, Astyanax is being called such out of gratitude and deference towards Hector, more towards anything that Astyanax and a newborn has done himself.
Sorry, hold on a second.
Okay. Ugh. Need a drink. Lord of the cities, and Hector was the lone defense of Troy. The great man of war, breaking into a broad smile, his gaze fixed on his son in silence. Andromache pressed close beside him, and weeping freely now, clung to his hand. Sorry, I just lost myself. Clung to his hand, urged him, called him, reckless one, my Hector. Your own fiery courage will destroy you. Have you no pity for him, our helpless son? Or me, and the destiny that weighs me down, your widow, now so soon? Yes, soon they will kill you off. All the Achaean forces massed for assault, and then, bereft of you, better for me to sink beneath the earth. What other warmth, what comforts left for me once you have met your doom? Nothing but torment. Okay. Brutal. Sounds like a lot, but honestly, and we're going to see this come up again in book 24, Andromache is really well aware of the fate that would await her and Astyanax, frankly, should and really when Troy were to eventually fall to the Greeks. She would be enslaved. She would be taken as a war prize. We know that's ultimately what's going to happen to her. She's going to be taken by Neoptolemus, because obviously Achilles slays Hector, so it feels only right. Astyanax is going to be, again, most commonly it is said to be Neoptolemus. There are other versions. He's going to be chucked off the walls and killed. So she is just looking forward and seeing like, this is not going to end well. Even she's looking at him like, we're holding out, but if you fall, we're fucked. Everybody kind of recognizes that. So there's a very real and dark tragedy to her wishing, like, I'd rather be dead than live the kind of hellish life that she would live as a war prize and slave of a Greek hero. Which, I mean, all of the women of Troy essentially have to fear that. This is what every woman in Troy would be worrying about should they lose. I have lost my father. Mother's gone as well. Father, the brilliant Achilles laid him low when he stormed Cilicia's city filled with people, Thebe with her towering gates. He killed Eetion. Not that he stripped his gear, he'd some respect, at least. We burned his corpse and all his blazoned bronze, then heaped a grave mound high above the ashes, and nymphs of the mountain planted elms around it, daughters of Zeus, whose shield is storm and thunder. Ooh, that is some, that bit, talking about what Achilles, just like he had that respect at least. He burned his corpse and all his blazoned bronze. That's really dark kind of foreshadowing that Homer is doing there via the mouth of Andromache. And it hurts more because this is, I mean, you think about what's going to happen to her husband. You think of what Achilles is going to do to the corpse of Hector later in this poem. In his Mennice, in his rage, and in his moment of Aristeia, Achilles is going to refuse Hector the very same respect that he should have shown him, and that he ultimately did, show to Andromache's father after he killed him. Even if you strip the body of the bronze, which, that's one thing. You leave it to at least get funeral honors, which Achilles is going to deny Hector. He's going to deny Priam. He's going to deny Andromache, all these things initially. And it's just like, oh, that's some dark foreshadowing. Like, again, there's a lot of stuff, especially, in this book, that is a lot of sort of dark foreshadowing of what's going to happen when Troy ultimately falls. Again, the poem's very obsessed with this. What's going to happen ultimately when Hector dies, which we know he's going to before the end of the story. She talks for every other woman of Troy. Think back at the moment before when every woman came to Hector asking for their man's destiny with this mindset. Yeah, it's very heartbreaking. And that's, Homer, again, as much as there's no sympathy for Paris, it's understanding, like, the fall of a city, everyone suffers when that happens. The women are absolutely victims of this. And so, yeah, Andromache is really the voice for all the women of Troy. But even more so, she is also the voice, especially for the privileged women of Troy, because the poem doesn't really care much about Briseis. I mean, Chryseis is really just in terms of the kicking off the fight. Any woman who's not of noble, we'll say, birth. Ah, yes. The funerary writes that Elpenor was for. Indeed. The focus is on women of rank, in the same way that heroes in these tales are really only focused on men of rank. We kind of don't care if you're the average Joe Schmo. Small spoiler. Is it that much of a spoiler when it's Elpenor and we did the Odyssey? Is it a spoiler? There we go. And the 7 brothers I had within our halls, all in the same day went down to the house of death. The great, godlike runner, Achilles, butchered them all, tending their shambling oxen, shining flocks. Again, the warrior, the killer is the butcher, the innocents are those who are killed. Again, these Trojans are not really often being described as warriors. They're so related with things where it's like you were not bred for war the way the Greeks were, which in this war, that's why the Greeks win. And mother, who ruled over the timberland of woody Plakos once, he no sooner hailed her here with his other plunder than he took a priceless ransom, set her free, and home she went to her father's royal halls, where Artemis, showering arrows, shot her down. So, no, I thought we were some lines back and I spoiled Andromache's words. Sorry. Oh, no, you were good. Pretty sure you were. Maybe I'm wrong. So, that bit. The Artemis showering arrows shot her down. The arrows are not literal arrows, it's illness. In the same way that Apollo brings like disease, plague, and unexpected illness specifically to men and boys, so does Artemis bring this for girls and women. We can think back to our whole kerfuffle in the Odyssey over Artemis's gentle shafts. I know Mariana is now having a terrible flashback. Essentially, that's the idea of like a swift, merciful death that spares a mortal from a long, like painful illness or death. That's when they would be gentle. No, we don't! I know, I'm so sorry, Mariana. I brought up Mariana's trauma. I'm so sorry, Mariana, but at least we're moving on now. But yeah, so it's just more to know these shafts, these arrows of Artemis are illness. And if they are described as gentle, we're saying like it's essentially giving you a swift and painless death as opposed to a long, protracted, painful illness or process of dying. Specifically for women, in the same way that Apollo is for men again. The divine twins. You, Hector, you are my father now, my noble mother, a brother too, and you are my husband, young and warm and strong. Pity me, please. Take your stand on the rampart here before you orphan your son and make your wife a widow. Draw your armies up where the wild fig tree stands, there, where the city lies most open to assault, the walls lower, easily overrun. 3 times they have tried that point, hoping to storm Troy. Their best fighters, led by the great and little Ajax, famous Idomeneus, Atreus' son, valiant Diomedes. Perhaps a skilled prophet revealed the spot, where their own fury whips them on to attack. Parakoitis here. So this is a true marriage. See? Homer, you sneaky son of a biche. And tall Hector nodded, his helmet flashing. All this weighs on my mind too, dear woman. But I would die of shame to face the men of Troy and the Trojan women trailing their long robes if I would shrink from battle now, a coward. Nor does the spirit urge me on that way. I've learned it all too well. To stand up bravely, always to fight in the front ranks of Trojan soldiers, winning my father great glory for myself. For in my heart and soul, I also know this well. The day will come when sacred Troy must die. Priam must die, and all his people with him. Priam who hurls the strong ash spear. Okay. This is important. And I want to emphasize this because let's make this clear. Hector is a very noble character, we would say. He's noble. In the same way that a lot of the Greek heroes would also, in the eyes of the Greeks, like Hector, be considered noble. But I do think it's important here, he notes, I would die of shame to face the men of Troy as a coward. And also, he goes, my spirit doesn't urge me that way. I still fight for glory. He, like the Greek hero, is chasing the same thing. He chases the perfect death. He chases Kleos, the thing that defines the Homeric hero. And in that same way, he would rather die then see what should happen to his people or to his wife should Troy fall and he did not go out and chase his glory. And again, there's a romance to this. There's something deeply loving. They clearly have a loving relationship. I'm not taking away from that, but I need to say, because Homer liked to bring reasonably complex characters here, and lots of things can be true at once, he also, like the Greeks, has that inherent, we'll say, self-centered view. You might call it almost a kind of selfishness, where he's still only thinking about his glory. He verbalizes it himself. It's glory for my father, glory for me. Knowing he will then die. And you could say, well, that's noble. I'm like, okay, well then hold the same for the Greeks. Is it noble? Or is it still kind of selfish? If you know, you could lead them from somewhere else, but this is the ethos of the Greek hero, so he still possesses some of that, the same way the Greek hero does. And I'm not saying that necessarily as a negative. I'm saying it's neutral. It's understanding. This is the way these warrior kings, warrior princes, these heroes live their lives. This is how they function. Because he knows, really everyone knows, should he die, Troy's likely going to fall. He's always fighting out on the front. The chances of him dying are exponentially higher. If I would argue, I think it is safe to make the argument that if he had truly cared for Andromache's safety in the way that he kind of always says he does, he could have sent her away while the Greeks were marching on their way towards Troy. Because remember, they land in Asia Minor and then they march their whole way to Troy. If this were truly about Andromache's safety and her safety only, you send her out. Yeah, you think maybe you can hold it, but just in case. Send her out somewhere safe. Just in case, hey. But then you remember, 10 years ago, he didn't have an heir. Astyanax is a baby in year 9. Astyanax wasn't there. So, is there a kind of foolishness to the naive thinking that, hey, I'm going to keep my wife around until at least I have an heir, and then now even that he's got an heir, it's all way too late, and by that point you are seeing the writing on the wall. Did he value the potential for an heir, the presence of an heir, over the ability for his wife, whom he loves and cares for, and all of her, to potentially survive with some kind of relative freedom? Send her back to her father's dead. Send her somewhere else. Send her to an allied kingdom that's, not in the path of the Greeks. Push her further east. And again, I say all this, and I'm not trying to say, well, Hector's a shit person. I don't think so. I like Hector. You're meant to like Hector. Because he's the defender of the polis. He's the defender of the city. I think it is possible for him to love his wife, love his newborn son, and also still value his kleos and the idea of his bloodline and his legacy over what we would see as their safety and their well-being. And I think that also puts him perfectly in line with the other Greek heroes. I think were one of these other heroes, they would behave the same way. And I think that's why we're kind of meant to like Hector, and that's why the Greeks respect Hector. They see him and they get it. And we can go, and that's still kind of fucking selfish, because maybe you could have saved her life if you'd sent her off somewhere. Just saying. But that doesn't matter. Can't he still ship Andromache and his son away? If there's a way for them to escape, why hasn't he done that already? At this point, year 9, and they've gotten fucking close to breaching the walls a couple points, as she even says. And you're looking at the treasury starting to run low. Why haven't you sent them away? And that's the thing, can he? We don't really know. It's never explicitly said. They raided everything on the way to Troy, and they've probably raided around the surroundings, which is why I say, why didn't you do it at the start of the war? If you really were worried for the potential safety of your wife, but he needed an heir. And that's where I go. There's the inherent self-centered view. But this is normal. I'm not trying to say it as that, like, oh, this makes Hector a bad person. I don't think it does. I think it's just important to know there is an inherent self-centeredness to all of these heroes, to all of these men. There's absolutely an inherent self-centeredness. Because if he genuinely, for a moment, thought she could have been safe I mean, or, if before they got there, because you hear the Greeks are coming, you hear they're raiding cities on their way. They're big. They're not exactly fast. It's 1,000 ships worth of people. They're not fast. Didn't think they could take Troy, but even so. Okay, but he can't, because if he does, then every other one in Troy would do the same. And is that so bad? If you're sending the women away, the women aren't fighting for you. But that's the thing. The safety of the non-combatants in the city is frankly not that important. Not compared to the public front. The public front, your reputation. I'm trying to realize, well, also again, let's not forget, Astyanax is a baby in year 9, which means for all those 9 years, he did not have an heir. They don't have any other noted children. So that was also important to him. It mattered more. And again, everybody's getting kind of defensive. I'm pointing this out because there is an inherent self-centered view to the men and the heroes of this story. This is part of the worldview. These things are not considered. Or if they are, they take less precedence over other things. And I'm saying this to say he really is. Okay, guys. I know, because everybody likes Hector. I knew I was going to say this and everybody was going to get real defensive. This is not about me trying to slag off Hector. I've made it clear. I like Hector a lot. And again, the narrative wants you to like Hector. Homer likes Hector. Everyone likes and respects Hector. We are obviously cool with Hector. It's just important to note, he, even though a Trojan, is very well representative of the ethos of the Greek hero. In that certain things are not considered or even bothered to be attempted. Because he's thinking, well, I need my bloodline. I need an heir. I don't have an heir. Again, Astyanax is a little baby right now, year 9. So, all those years, need an heir. Can't send her out because it freaks out the rest of the city. So frankly, sorry, honey, your safety does not matter in comparison to the public front we need to put forth. And nobody would in any way criticize him for this. And I'm not trying to criticize him for this. I'm noting, welcome to the state of play. They are beautiful and they are loving. We also have to acknowledge there's an inherently self-centered view to these heroes and their entire way of going through life. We've said it with the Greeks. The same applies to Hector. He's the defender of the city and all these things. The same applies to Hector. Generally, well, later in classical Greece, they certainly don't, because there's a real, especially if you look at the Athenians, they get really tied to the idea of like the land and where they are, but we don't quite see that yet here. What these Greeks share is not like a land, it's a language. But then you get to the Athenians and stuff like the Greco-Persian Wars, and the Athenians are really especially obsessed with like the land that they live on. And that ties to their idea of democracy and all that. There's a lot of, you'd have to go read a lot of other stuff. Yes, exactly. Every hero has flaws. So it's acknowledging Hector is not some paragon of virtue and like perfection. He's a human like all the others. He's not perfect. I mean, granted, he's standing in contrast to Paris. So honestly, the bars in fucking Tartarus, he looks like so good comparison. Is it the thinking that just as Hector's death kicks off the winding down of the fall of Troy, so too would him prioritizing his family's safety over others, thus morale would be less? It could be an effect on morale. I would see it as if the rest of the city found out. It could, again, morale. The morale of the city is more important than the lives of your loved ones. Morale is more important than a lot of other things. So we're coming again to morale and reputation are all very, very much tied together. So reputation. Yeah, no, character limit, I know. Yeah, so reputation. The public face is always more important than just about anything. Exactly, and I'm saying this is across the board. The Greeks think the same way. I'm just noting this because I know we love Hector. But it's important to also discuss that Hector is not perfect, in the same way that the Greeks are not perfect. I mean, God, how much have I been shitting on most of the Greeks here? Especially you, Achilles. I'm looking at you. It's important to note that nobody is perfect in this story. Nobody is some sort of paragon of virtue or whatever else. Like, there are moments where they might be a paragon of certain values, but they're still very, very human. I doubt Hector would delay having an heir. You don't delay having an heir. No, because you might die. And you don't know how long that baby might survive. Look, infant mortality rates were probably insane. Or even the mortality rate of Andromache. I mean, if she dies, of wives, of people, of women in labor, I mean, giving birth is its own war. And a lot of women die, especially just from, post-birth, like, infections and shit. So, like, no, you get that shit started quick. You need an heir, and you need a spare, really. But if your wife dies in childbirth, you need to move on to the next wife. Like, you gotta keep this going. So that's why it's like, the fact that they have not had an heir until now is really notable. Part of it, I do think, is it is absolutely an element of, like, we are kind of, we could say sympathy baiting. But there's a reason this is a game of pick your favorite war criminal. Is Hector technically committing a war crime here? Yes, so are the Greeks. Oh, everybody's a war criminal. It is odd that he doesn't have an heir until year 9 of the war. Yeah, that's the thing that really boggles my mind, is I'm like, did they have previous children who died in childbirth? Were there miscarriages? Like, year 9 and you only just now have an heir? You've been married this whole time. You were married before all this too, so like, it is kind of an odd detail. It's a very odd detail. We only talk about, he's never recorded as having any other children. Him and Andromache, they're never recorded as having other children. And that's why it's just like, it's kind of an odd thing. It's very odd. Regardless, again, I'm not trying to say, and that is why Hector is a terrible person. No, I like Hector. I think it's just like, the reason I think, as we would say, real calls to real, the Greeks absolutely fuck with him, is they're like, yeah, I see you. And in that same way of I see you involves the idea of, you're like me. We both have this kind of self-centered view. We have this obsession with glory and even concubines and mistresses. Those aren't heirs. They're not heirs. In the same way that Menelaus has a son from, like, a mistress, from a slave or whatever. Megapenthes, he is not in line to inherit anything. Not in the world of the Homerics. It's the same way that Teucer, he's the son of Telamon and his concubine, who is Priam's sister, by the way. No, he's the bastard son. So no, these people are not meant to be inheriting. From what we see in the Homeric epics. Again, remember, Homeric Greece is its own mishmash of it's 3 different, like, historical ages in a trench coat, and so it's a bit of a mess. Yeah, no, we like and respect Hector in the same way that I like and respect many of the other Greek heroes, and I acknowledge, wait a minute. In the first years of the war, that her family was slain. What's the evacuation one? Well, if you want to evacuate her back home, I didn't say you had to evacuate her back home. I just said evacuate her out. You have allies. All of your allies are coming from different cities that have clearly not been raided, because they're not talking about them being raided. You could have sent her to an ally. The plan is feasible. It's just not done. That's fine, because that's not what they did then. And we can look at it and go, that is kind of selfish. That's okay. That was the times. Yeah, her family was a Trojan ally. I know, but they're not the only Trojan ally. We've got a lot of allies who are here. I know her family is a Trojan ally. I never said they had to evacuate her to her family. I said just evacuate her out. To a different ally. One who's not in the path of the Trojans, of the Greeks coming to Troy. I'd be looking further inland, where the Greeks are not really going to go, because they're trying to get to Troy. And again, We're arguing a lot on the feasibility of this. I'm like, it's totally a feasible plan. It might not be a good plan. It's one they would never take because you don't want to risk the morale. If you risk the morale, striking the safest place because of their walls. They do have good walls. Their walls have been breached before. These same walls were breached by Heracles and Telamon not one generation earlier. Well, 2 generations almost. Heracles and Telamon took it in like a fucking week. With what, like 6 ships? And I get that it's Heracles. But the walls have been taken. Yes, they do believe in their strength at their walls, but let's be real, the walls have been taken. But it's also, they have not had an heir. He has to keep her there, if for no other reason than he needs an heir. Passing on the bloodline is important. If she'd been evacuated, she'd at least have been like almost in exile in a different city. That's sad, but she's not a slave to Neoptolemus. Look, the whole point is acknowledging Hector is not some sort of perfect paragon of virtue with no flaws. And that's not a black mark on his character, it just makes him human. I mean, good God, if you want to talk about somebody who's like awful, again, Paris is right there. There are members of the Greeks. How long have I been shitting on Achilles? Like, we're looking at a whole bunch of people essentially making a lot of really shitty decisions because it's war. Greek army, if she's evacuated. Yeah, if you've waited this long. And the point is, he waited this long, likely because they did not have any children. No recorded children. So, oh my God, guys, calm the fuck down. The whole point is everybody is making really shitty decisions because we are seeing humanity at their least exemplar. If that, everybody's kind of at their worst. No, we're not done reading. I just said something that made everybody very defensive and upset. And it has devolved. By saying we must acknowledge that Hector as well has his flaws and has made decisions that are inherently selfish and everything else. Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. It's important to pass on your bloodline and your legacy, and you can make an argument that's why also he hasn't sent her away. Like, definitely. They have not, so far as we have been told by any narrative, they did not have a kid. Astyanax was their only kid, and it's like, bloodline. Gotta make it happen. Okay. Because we have more things to talk about. Mariana, you get me. We have reached an accord. Okay, moving on. Where the heck was I? Here we go. Even so, it is less the pain of the Trojans still to come that weighs me down, not even of Hecuba herself or King Priam, or the thought that my own brothers and all their numbers, all their gallant courage may tumble in the dust, crushed by enemies. There's nothing beside your agony when some brazen Argive hails you off in tears, wrenching away your day of light and freedom. Which I'm like, bro, if she'd been able to get to safety before all of this, if we had not prioritized it, and far off in the land of Argos you must live, laboring at a loom at another woman's beck and call. Fetching water at some spring, Messaius or Hyperia, resisting it all the way, the rough yoke of necessity at your neck, and a man may say, who sees you screaming tears, there is the wife of Hector, the bravest fighter they could field, those stallion-breaking Trojans, long ago when the men fought for Troy. So he will say, and the fresh grief will swell your heart once more, widowed, robbed of the one man strong enough to fight off your day of slavery. No, let the earth come piling over my dead body before I hear your cries. I hear you dragged away. Which, yeah, again, we've already talked about all this, and I should have maybe waited before this bit. It is somehow Kleos for Hector, which is, that's the point I'm making. And it is still kind of all about Kleos for Hector. We do need to point this out. That kind of self-centered worldview. We love Hector. He's still got it. Like all the other Greeks, like frankly all the rest of the Trojans, except for Paris, but he doesn't count. He is a perfect representation of that same kind of ethos. We are just seeing him with his wife at home. So obviously, we feel more sympathy for him because we see his wife at home and because we know he's doomed. So it's like you have all that extra pathos, but it's like, great. We need to take off our pathos-colored glasses and also look and go, hey, this is still kind of all about Kleos for Hector. He's the same as them. And that's okay. Again, everybody get cool with shit real quick. We said that at the beginning. Yeah, chuckles in classic Hellenic hero self-centered mindset. Yeah. Hey, real recognizes real. That's why the Greeks respect Hector. It's why Hector respects the Greeks. Like calls to like. In the same breath, shining Hector reached down for his son. But the boy recoiled, cringing against his nurse's full breast, screaming out at the sight of his own father, terrified by the flashing bronze, the horsehair crest, the great ridge of the helmet nodding, bristling terror. So it struck his eyes. And his loving father laughed. His mother laughed as well. And glorious Hector, quickly lifting the helmet from his head, set it down on the ground, fiery in the sunlight, and raising his son, he kissed him, tossed him in his arms, lifting a prayer to Zeus and the other deathless gods. Zeus, all you immortals, grant this boy, my son, may be like me, first in glory among the Trojans, strong and brave like me, and rule all of Troy in power, and one day let them say, he is a better man than his father, when he comes home from battle wearing the bloody gear of the mortal enemy he has killed in war, a joy to his mother's heart. Again, that's kind of still all about Hector. Okay, but I do want to note, we have this moment where Astyanax has these cries. You know, his father reaches for him, and Astyanax is like, what are you, monster? And Hector and Andromache laugh. They find it amusing. And again, I find that some very dark and kind of tragic foreshadowing. Because ultimately, the last thing Hector's son will soon see in life is a warrior in bronze. Again, traditionally, it's usually the Abdelamus who chucks him off the walls of Troy. But I also look at the laughter of Hector and Andromache, because, I mean, they're having all this deep, intense moment. And again, this is all still about Hector and his glory. There is a kind of almost grim, maybe gallows humor to the way that they're laughing, or it could be a reflection of how conflict is so reasonably common in this world. As we see, it's a very violent and unstable world. But even more so now that, as we would say, men in armor have become a kind of normalized sight in Troy, thanks to the current war. Again, we're in year 9. The shadow of the 4 sure is looming. It is true. And hoping for a future for the baby. Yeah, a future for the baby that is like, he's as good as his father. Okay, so it's all still about you. Again, the importance then of having the heir is passing on the legacy. So they'll also still talk about you, and they can't talk about you if all of your bloodline has died out. This is all still about Kleos and glory at the end of the day. I'm just saying, he just happens to be the defender, and we get to see him as the family man in a way that we don't get to see for the Greeks. Right? Just due to circumstances. We're sieging Troy. We're not sieging Mycenae. Well, maybe we wouldn't look that. We're not sieging Ithaca. I mean, why they would bother, I don't know, but So Hector prayed and placed his son in the arms of his loving wife. Andromache pressed the child to her scented breast, smiling through her tears. Her husband noticed, and filled with pity now, Hector stroked her gently, trying to reassure her, repeating her name. Andromache, dear one, why so desperate? Why so much grief for me? No man will hurl me down to death against my fate. And fate, no one alive has ever escaped it, neither brave man nor coward. I tell you, it's born with us the day we are born. So please go home and tend to your tasks, the distaff and the loom, and keep the women working hard as well. As for the fighting, men will see to that. All who were born in Troy, but I most of all. Hector, a flash in arms, took up his horsehair-crested helmet once again, and his loving wife went home, turning, glancing, back again, and weeping live, warm tears. She quickly reached the sturdy house of Hector, man killing Hector, and found her women gathered there inside, and stirred them all to a high pitch of mourning. So in his house they raised dirges for the dead, for Hector still alive. His people were so convinced that never again would he come home from battle, never escape the Argives' rage and bloody hands. Nor did Paris linger long in his vaulted halls. Soon as he buckled on his elegant, gleaming bronze, he rushed through Troy, sure in his racing stride, as a stallion full-fed at the manger, stalled too long, breaking free of his tether, gallops down the plain, out for his favorite plunge in a river's cool currents, thundering in his pride, his head flung back, his mane streaming over his shoulders, sure and sleek in his glory, knees racing him on to the fields and stallion haunts he loves. So down from Pergamus heights came Paris, son of Priam, glittering in his armor like the sun astride the skies, exultant, laughing aloud. His fast feet speed him on. Quickly he overtook his brother, noble Hector, still lingering, slow to turn from the spot where he had just confided in his wife. Magnificent Paris spoke first. Dear brother, look at me, holding you back in all your speed, dragging my feet, coming to you so late, and you told me to be quick. A flash of his helmet as Hector shot back. Impossible, man. How could anyone fair and just underrate your work in battle? You're a good soldier, but you hang back of your own accord, refuse to fight, and that's why the heart inside me aches when I hear our Trojans heap contempt on you, the men who bear such struggles, all for you. Come, now for attack. We'll set all this to rights. Some day, if Zeus will ever let us raise the wine bowl of freedom high in our halls, high to the god of cloud and sky, who lives forever. Once we drive these Argives geared for battle out of Troy. Apply glitter to it. He's quite the peacock. The peacock really, no offense to the peacock and no offense to Hera, because that is her bird, and she would not love to have that compared. Whole paragon to the horse is kind of weird, though, isn't it? In the whole discourse of free will and decision. And it's a horse who's breaking out of his paddock, a creature that they tame. But it's also like the way it's described, it's like, oh, he's off to go have a quick little dip in his favorite spring. It's like he's treating this lightly. Because even the Greeks, when they get all like exultant in war, are still just like, this is war. It's not a game. It feels like Paris treats it like a game. Like there's some, the whole comparison to the horse it's very odd, and that it like sets for me like this odd tone. I read it and I'm just like, huh. Like, why is this image of something, it feels almost like frivolous, or like I'm just exulting in how good I look and how great I know I am. And Hector says like, you're a good fighter. You just like literally don't do anything. Like, what the fuck? Why don't you do something? And so, the horse that's in his favorite stable, because it's like, well, if it's his favorite and it's all these things he loves, then he's not really being held against his will. It's because he chooses to not leave his favorite stable. But now he feels like it to go have a dip. It feels like he's only doing what he wants, and again, when he's air quotes forced, but he's still just like, I guess I'll go have some fun. I'll go take a dip. I don't know. I agree, Mariana. It's a really odd comparison. And it stands out because most of the comparatives and these sort of, metaphors and similes and everything, it's a prideful animal that breaks free and does what he wants. But Paris doesn't. He does so because it's called out. And again, he was Promachos. Well, he was briefly Promachos, and then he hid back. And then he got forced back to the front. Kind of wants to fight. Yeah. That's what I say. It's so weird. No, I feel you, Mariana. It's very odd. I wonder if it's expressing maybe that kind of dual nature of where you have Alexandros in Paris, and it's like the Alexandros that the potential of the hero he could have been is there. But then there's Paris, the hero that actually is there in front of us. And I think even that's what Hector's saying. He's like, the potential's there. You just don't. Right? If that makes sense. It's Employ these frenemies that will not set in foot. The will not set in foot. Yeah. As I say, and I think it's why it's always important to look at like how he is sometimes referred to as, Alexandros, and sometimes he's Paris. And it's like Alexandros is like the what could have been, the potential that was there, and then you have Paris. These Paris, just always these Paris, these Paris on you, these Paris on your leopard pelt, like. And that is what makes that sort of very odd comparison actually make sense and be very fitting. Homer, you sneaky son of a bitch. I had potential shirt. Yeah, literally, he needs the I had potential shirt. If I only had a brain. And also, if I only had a heart, if I only had courage, all these things, it's like, good God, you are just a trifecta of confusion and weird. Yes, ma'am. He has a brain, he just doesn't have the will to act. Yeah, he has a brain, he just doesn't do anything about it. Paris is Bear. I'm telling you. And not you, Bear. Not you, Bear. You're a good bear. We say that, and I know we mean the character from Obsession, and I'm also just like, there is Bear, the dog, there on the floor. That is Bear. Just like there is Moose, and there is Charlie. And Peck is down off camera staring at me. Oh. Woo. Not Doggo Bear, Obsession. Yeah, I know. It just makes me laugh because he'll be like, not you, Bear. He doesn't forget to use it. He just willfully doesn't. That's the difference. It's not like he forgets. He just his one bit of will is in not doing anything. That's why he deliberately sleepwalks through his existence.